Cloud over for many, but where we do get the sunnier breaks develop, we'll also see some heavy thundery showers developing once more. Further showers on Thursday, better for Friday, temperatures rising.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a very good afternoon, everybody. It's just about to go 3 p.m. I am Patrick Christys, and I will be with you for the next 3 hours. But here is what I've got coming up between now and 4 p.m. Are our royal family too white? Believe it or not, there has been some criticism about that. Are they just a normal British family, or does there need to be more ethnic diversity in there? I'll be talking all about that. I also want to know whether or not you feel the police were too heavy-handed to arrest so many people in the run-up to the coronation. There's talk of the police even being sued for doing that. Were they doing the right thing in stopping disruption, or actually were they a bit OTT, and is it against freedom of speech? In other news, apparently it is good if you want to see a GP. I mean, that would be a nice thing, wouldn't it? But supposedly a load more money is going to be pumped into technology, which means that when you call a GP surgery in the morning, you're more likely to get through, you're more likely to get an appointment. That could cut down the NHS waiting list if indeed it actually works. And have the Tories lost the working class? That's one thing that I want to know, as the red wall apparently, well, went red again. How can the Tories win back the working class? I will have the one and only Lee Anderson coming up very, very shortly, right here on this show. All of that coming your way and much, much more with me, Patrick Christys.
Good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. I'm Tamsin Roberts. It's 1 minute past 3.
The Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children are joining millions of volunteers for the final day of coronation celebrations. The King's grandchildren have all been getting stuck in to help renovate a scout hut in Slough for the big help out. Prince William gave Prince Louis a lesson in driving a digger. All 3 children then tried their hand at archery. Meanwhile, Princess Anne has met with local volunteers in Swindon. Some 6 million people are taking part in the big help out, either arranging their own community activities or working with charities. The Prime Minister, who's been preparing food at a village hall in Hertfordshire, has praised the weekend celebrations.
And it's community spirit like this that binds our country together. It's fantastic to be a part of it here today and help out myself. Now, on the weekend, I think no other country in the world could put on such a dazzling spectacle. And it was a proud expression of our history, our culture, our traditions, but also a reflection of the modern character of our country. It was deeply moving to be in the coronation service and incredibly uplifting. And it's an experience, I think, that nobody will forget for the rest of their lives.
The Met Police will face questioning over the arrests made during the King's coronation. It's amid concerns a clampdown affected the right to protest. 64 people were arrested, including those from the anti-monarchy group Republic and environmental activist group Just Stop Oil. The government has defended the police response following complaints that officers went too far. The government says it'll give £240 million to GP practices this year to improve basic services and to end the so-called 8 a.m. scramble to get an appointment. The money will be used to introduce an online booking service and upgrade telephone systems. More receptionists will be trained, with their role expanded to speed up the booking process. But Shadow Health Minister Andrew Gwynn told GB News more still needs to be done.
There's nothing in it that will train more doctors, that will enable patients to use a face-to-face appointment, or that will bring back the family GP. It's a very shallow tinkering around at the edges. What we really ought to have had was the government's workforce strategy, something we've been calling for on the Labour benches for some time, that sets out how we are going to get the extra doctors, the extra staff in the NHS that we need to be able to transform the NHS into the service we want it to be.
Ukraine says Russia has fired 60 Iranian-made kamikaze drones at key cities, including over 30 in the capital. A food warehouse was set ablaze by a missile in the Black Sea port city of Odessa. Ukrainian officials say Russia has intensified the shelling of Bakhmut, hoping to take it by tomorrow, their Victory Day holiday. Meanwhile, President Zelensky will meet with the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, tomorrow to discuss a new support package. Former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko says we need to stop Russian aggression.
We have destroyed civilian object, and this is just very easy to understand. Putin does not stop shelling Ukraine, and the only way how we can stop Putin is our joint victory, like we do in the Second World War. Today there was an anti-Hitler coalition. Today we create the anti-Putin coalition.
A man's been remanded in custody charged with attempted murder after an attack on a 71-year-old woman in Worcester. 56-year-old Anthony Roberts was also charged with sexual assault and possession of a bladed article in a public place. The woman was attacked near the River Severn last night and remains in a critical condition in hospital. Roberts will appear in court next month. The First Minister of Scotland has been accused of negligence for delaying a mental health pledge. The proposal aims to recruit an additional 1,000 mental health workers and provide every GP practice with access to a wellbeing service by 2026. But it's been paused due to so-called difficult decisions in November's emergency budget review. The Scottish Labour Party says mental health is low on the government's priority list, but the government says it is committed to improving the services. A bill calling for companies to follow a code of practice while removing unsafe cladding is due to be tabled in Parliament. Residents in a tower block in Ipswich claim they were deprived of fresh air and natural light when a construction company removing the dangerous cladding wrapped the building in shrink wrap without informing them. Conservative MP Tom Hunt is introducing the Cladding Remediation Works bill, calling for better communication with residents and a clear timescale. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
OK, welcome along, everybody. Now, just a quick reminder of some of our main topics today. We're going to be talking about whether or not the royal family are indeed too white, because somebody has piped up and said that they were shocked at how white that balcony was, despite the fact that, of course, they are a British royal family. Anyway, also, were the police too heavy-handed? Emails already flooding in on both of those two topics. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I want to hear from you throughout. We're going to have debates on those throughout. But 6 million people across the country are joining voluntary events today in the big Help Out, a national event to mark the Coronation Bank holiday. Even some members of the royal family have got stuck right in, renovating a local scout hut, and there are more than 52,000 registered events from Scotland to Cornwall to mark the importance of public service. And there's some really nice video I'm going to play you a little bit later on of Prince Louis just being as absolutely wild and, dare I say it in a rather nice way, feral as he usually is. But Nicholas Owen, who's certainly not feral or wild, is a royal correspondent, and he joins me this afternoon. Thank you very, very much. Look, great to have you on the show. Were you as shocked maybe as I was to hear about some of the comments about the demographics of the royal family? I mean, they are just our royal family, aren't they? Does it matter?
Yes, I was a bit, well, surprised, I suppose, but shocked. And nothing much shocks me anymore, Patrick, to be honest, of the way things are in the world these days. But it's an odd thing, isn't it? Complaining that the royal family is, I think the right phrase would be too white, or is that the right way to put it? Well, of course, we've been through this mill already, haven't we, with Harry and Meghan, with the prince who managed to come to the coronation very briefly and then dashed off back to California to be there at his little son's birthday, or at least give him a kiss goodnight. But Meghan was very hot on this business of racially diverse attention to detail and so on, and that did not end well, did it? Very sadly. So I think it's a bit tricky. I mean,
well, the irony is, the irony, of course, is, Nicholas, that the balcony would have been less white had Meghan decided to accept the invitation and actually turn up. And this is something I can't quite get my head around. I mean, seriously, the option was there. The opportunity was there for the balcony to have been more diverse than it was, and Meghan, that particular individual, said no.
Well, absolutely. Well, as you say, it said no. Of course, there was a terrific number of very, very difficult events between Meghan being absolutely lauded in this country. I mean, the reception they got, you have to remember back, Windsor was an amazing sight last night, wasn't it, with that concert? But think back to that wonderful wedding, Harry and Meghan, and the crowds that were there, and the acclamation there was for her, for Meghan particularly, and also for Harry himself. But then it all began to go wrong. Harry decided he was going to tell the world what a rotten childhood he'd had, and how they were all so awful to him. And also there was quite a bit of stuff about unconscious bias and so on. And lo and behold, as you quite rightly say, the net effect is a rather more white balcony scene than you might have expected.
But also, I would shudder to see the reaction that they would get if the particular lady, the Bridgerton star who was on ITV's coverage, Joa Ando, had watched the coronation in a previous African nation or somewhere in the Middle East or something along those lines. I mean, the ethnic diversity there isn't exactly rife, is it? So it does seem a little bit odd, I think. But can I just ask you a slightly broader question about the ceremony as a whole? I actually was quite personally offended by some of the reaction to the ceremony. I get that it was quite long, and I get that it's not everybody's cup of tea, but it is, at its root, a Christian ceremony, and there was diversity on display there. There was a black choir, there was a rabbi, there was, I believe, a black lady bishop as well. There was a Greek Orthodox priest. I mean, there was loads. I mean, our Hindu Prime Minister was doing a reading as well. So there was a huge amount of diversity. The coronation concert last night, I mean, it was incredibly vast. I mean, it looked like the United Nations, really, throughout the course of it. And so the idea that there's been some kind of protectionist racket of white upper-class British culture, I think, is a bit of a nonsense. But I couldn't help but wonder, Nicholas, whether or not some people who were slamming it realised that maybe they were actually being quite offensive to British values and British culture, because that was a display of British culture, wasn't it?
Well, the coronation itself, I suppose in a way it was, but it is absolutely, and you're absolutely right about this, a religious event, an absolutely religious event. I mean, to me, the thing that was really quite striking was not only all the people that you've mentioned from different faiths and so on, but the Roman Catholic Cardinal Vincent Nichols. Nichols was there and gave something to the king and greeted him and so on. That says it all, doesn't it? That we crossed all the boundaries in that service. We made sure that all faiths were represented one way or another. But it is still, the Protestant religion is still the one that is in our unwritten constitutions as it is, but certainly the way that the royal family has precedence over the rest of us through the Protestant religion still. And until somebody somewhere tinkers with that, or perhaps one of the very senior royals decides that they don't want to do that anymore in a long way in the future, I would suggest, that's what we've got.
What I'm going to go and talk on next with a different guest, Nicholas, is about the way that the police behave towards some of the Republican protesters and some other groups of protesters. So I'm going to park that for now with you, if that's all right. But you mentioned Harry there. Bit of a mixed bag, some of the reactions to Prince Harry. Some people saying he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't, and I can get that completely. He turned up, he was in the country for a grand total of around 28 hours. By my calculations, and you can work this out online, the 2 flights that he took amounted to something like 15 tonnes of CO2, which is rather a lot of offsetting. He's going to have to plant some kind of kale plantation in South America if he's going to make up for the amount of time that he was here and the jets that he took, which for a privacy-hungry eco-warrior was not necessarily the best thing in the world. But quite depressingly, I read this morning that King Charles had done a little toast to Archie wherever he is. And I just wondered, is Prince Harry depriving his children of something really special here?
I would say so. Yes, absolutely. But again, you'd have to wind the clock right the way back, wouldn't you? And you'd have to have a different approach to life by particularly Harry himself and his wife there in California. Harry was determined to lay it all out in front of the world, the absolute misery that he said he'd suffered. And therefore we see him going in rather at the back of the queue there, and certainly at well back when it came to the actual service itself, and departing very, very rapidly. You made a point about the aeroplane. The planes taking him to and fro. At least he didn't use a private jet. There were those who said, oh, he's losing a private jet, that's appalling. He didn't do that. What I think he could and should have done, and apparently did not do, was in those 28 hours that you quote, he didn't seem to make any attempt to get in touch with his father or his brother at all. That, to me, was... That's extraordinary, really. I couldn't. But there we are. It's a family rift. It's a very, very sad one, a very, very prominent one. The coronation mostly made us forget it, only for a few feet.
It did, and I think there's a big contrast as well, Nicholas, between what we're seeing today, which is this big help out between, you know, Prince William's there doing his thing, and you've got the kids with him, and they are learning, I think, a bit, aren't they, about service and about what it means to be a part of the royal family and a part of Britain, and they're lapping that up. Now, yes, you could argue, of course, that Harry's kids, touch wood, will never have to be in line to the throne in the way that Williams are, and so there is a key difference there. But when we're looking at, you know, Prince Louis driving a digger and George and Charlotte, bless her, desperately, Charlotte's basically got Louis's reins all the time, hasn't she, trying to cling on to him, and you think those children are being raised very differently, and I just feel a little bit for Harry's kids, although, of course, maybe they'll grow up to be very, very happy. Look, Nicholas, thank you very much. We're going to leave it there, but always a pleasure. What a way to start the show. Nicholas Owen there, who's a royal correspondent, and he was just talking about all things royal. I'm going to play this clip for you now, because this is something I'm going to have a debate on twice in this show, once in this hour and once in the 5. And it centres around whether or not there's a problem about the royal family being white. So Bridgerton star Joa Ando called the famous Buckingham Palace balcony terribly white during King Charles's coronation, during ITV's coverage. I believe we can have a look and a listen to that now.
There is a bit of me that we've gone from the rich diversity of the Abbey to a terribly white balcony. I'm very struck by that. I'm also looking at those younger generations and thinking, what are the nuances that they will inhabit as they grow? Nuances that Charles has exhibited from a teenage into early 20s young man.
The implication there for me is fascinating, isn't it? What's wrong with the royal family being white? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Now, moving on. 64 people were arrested on Saturday as part of the coronation policing operation, including 13 people to, quote, prevent a breach of the peace, which has caused massive controversy, actually. One of the anti-monarchy groups protesting, Republic, said that the arrests were premeditated to, quote, disrupt and diminish the demonstration. But Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has actually praised the policing operation for enabling the celebrations to go off without a hitch. Here's what Rishi said a little bit earlier on.
Well, the police are operationally independent of government. They'll make these decisions based on what they think is best. And actually, I'm grateful to the police and everyone who played a part in ensuring that this weekend has gone so well, so successfully and so safely. That was an extraordinary effort by so many people, and I'm grateful to them for all their hard work.
I'm joined now by the Deputy Hampshire Police and Crime Commissioner, Terry Norton. Terry, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Were the police too heavy-handed here? Does this set a bad precedent?
Well, no, I don't think they were too heavy-handed. I don't think it does set a bad precedent, really. Let's look at those words of the campaign group Republic. They wanted to disrupt and diminish the national event yesterday with hundreds of thousands of people across the country feeling very proud and enjoying their celebrations. So, short answer is no, I do not think they were too heavy-handed at all.
The police are sticking to the line that it was intelligence-led, and we, frankly, have to buy that, don't we? But at some point, I think that the public has a right to know what intelligence it was that led to those people being preemptively arrested. Do you agree?
Well, I do agree with that. We've heard that there are reports of rape alarms being used to startle horses, which is, of course, a very, very dangerous thing to do. And megaphones at those kind of events, of course, could cause some public damage. Let's remember that the police have one job, and that's to keep the public safe at these huge events. They are pressure cookers, these events, and we need to afford the police the opportunity to look into these events and to be able to act in a way that keeps the public safe. And if we're going to put blame somewhere, and if Gareth Graham-Smith, for instance, the head of the Campaign Republic group, wants to put blame somewhere, then I would look at the unpeaceful protests that have happened over the last few years. Those from the likes of Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, locking themselves onto things, disrupting our way of life, and setting fire to police vans in the Bristol riots. That's where I think we need to be putting the blame. That's where we need to be looking. Putting our frustrations if the likes of Graham Smith are frustrated with the way that protests are happening across this country.
One of the big arguments against the way the police behaved is actually a little bit about what you've spoken about there, because Just Stop Oil and groups like them can sit down in roads and block ambulances and block traffic. They can glue themselves to things and stick themselves to things and lock themselves to things, or slow walk, etc. And very often, like Extinction Rebellion, I mean, I only have to go back a couple of years, and they brought the entire capital to a standstill. And whilst there were some arrests there weren't a huge amount. And I just wonder whether or not there is a stark contrast between the police's apparent inability to arrest people sitting in the middle of a motorway and their ability to herd a load of Republicans up and shimmy them off.
Well, I think you've got to look at a number of things, really. One, the amount of people who are in those areas and in those situations. And of course, a horse, startled and running off into a crowd is incredibly dangerous. Not to say that it's not dangerous when they block motorways and what have you, but those protesters put themselves into those situations, don't they? Of course, we've had new powers that have recently come into effect. So that will be part of, I think, the government's plan to deal with protesting and how we look at it. But the key thing is you've got a large group of people there. They're pressure cookers, these situations. The largest public event since the Queen's funeral, and two of the largest events that we've had in this country for some time. And we need to afford the police a little bit of scope to be able to keep us safe and make some decisions within those situations. They're doing this for the right reasons, to keep the public safe. And it's those who disrupt and diminish this.
There is a precedent that's been set, Terry, as well, because the precedent, which seems to go under the radar for a lot of people, is about football hooliganism. So when the police knew that there was going to be groups of football hooliganisms rocking up to a particular place, they would preemptively act. So this isn't a new thing, and I can completely understand why people are angry about the idea that these people were arrested for their protest. And my anger around this, not that I've got a lot of anger, my understanding of people's anger about this is that if it was something I wanted to protest about, OK, I wouldn't like the idea of being preemptively locked up, and I can get that. But I think, Terry, given the importance of the situation, do we have to just try now to trust the police, which is very difficult at the minute because you've got like the Mayor of London talking about institutional racism and sexism and homophobia and all of this stuff. Do we have to just trust the police that they acted in the best interest of what was one of the most momentous events in national history and that they did the right thing?
Yes, I absolutely do think we have to trust the police on that. The vast majority of the police do a good, honourable job. Let's not forget they run towards danger to keep us safe. It would be different, I'm sure, if it were a football situation because it's a smaller amount of people and you have operations there to be able to be in place to preempt that. But yes, I think we do need to afford the police, particularly on a day like yesterday or the day before yesterday, with all of the the national celebrations and the huge amount of people in one place. Yes, we need to give the police the scope to be able to make those decisions and act with make those choices. Really.
Terry, look, thank you very much for coming on, and at short notice as well. Terry Notice there, who is the Deputy Hampshire Police and Crown Commissioner, Terry Norton even, there we go. Look, emails coming in. I am pleased that the police took a no-tolerance attitude to protesters on Coronation Day. I just wish they would take the same action when people break the law when protesting every day of the week. That's Mike. Angie says, there is no such thing as a peaceful protest these days, and the police were 100% right to arrest extremely selfish potential troublemakers. Long may it continue. Look, I think that the police acted correctly, and I think that they did the right thing, and I think that they were right to nip any potential trouble in the bud, because we don't want that. It would have ruined the day for a load of people. It potentially could have caused a massive scene. You could argue it's saving these protesters from themselves as well, because I'm amazed that none of them have been beaten up by ordinary members of the public so far, gluing themselves into roads, etc. I am absolutely amazed that no one's really gone to town on them. And I do wonder whether or not actually those people had the best of intentions. Was it going to be a peaceful protest? In my view, the police were right to preemptively act. However, I am wrestling with myself on this because, like I've said, if this was a protest that I was aligned with, and there may well come a time in my life, and may well come for you as well, where you feel the need to really protest about something, and if the police behaved in the same way to you as they behaved to the Republicans or they did to Just Stop Oil or whoever else was there, would you be unhappy with the way they'd acted? I suspect you might be. GBviews at gbnews.uk. But you are with me, Patrick Christys, and I've got loads coming up because we will get the latest on the government's GP funding pledge to stop the endless 8 a.m. scramble for appointments. This could be desperately good news. If you that horrible moment where you ring your GP and you're on hold, etc., etc. I'll be telling you what they're trying to do now, the government, to try and make it easier for you to get a much-needed GP's appointment. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, or should that be GP News? It's not my best. Britain's News Channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, sometimes trying to get into a GP surgery is a bit like trying to get out of Alcatraz, isn't it? But the government has announced plans to end what it calls the 8 a.m. scramble for GP appointments. So it's promised 240 million quid of funding to overhaul primary care. The proposals include the introduction of new online booking tools and the training of 6,500 receptionists. So Rishi Sunak was asked about this earlier today, and this is what he said.
But what we're saying today is we want to invest hundreds of millions of pounds in GP practices to help end the 8 a.m. scramble. That's investing in new technology so that people don't hear engaged tones when they call and that their call will be dealt with on the day so they know what is going to happen to them. That's new investment from the government going into general practices to help end the 8 a.m. scramble with new technology, with more to come tomorrow, because we want to make sure people can get the care that they need as quickly as they need it. It's all part of our plan to cut waiting lists.
OK, so that's what Rishi Sunak says. I'm bringing in Catherine Forster now, who's GB News' political reporter. So, Catherine, as it currently stands then, 8 a.m. comes, GP's open, you ring and ring and ring, you get an engaged tone or you get told you're number 50 in a queue. Does this stop that?
It should do. So they're bringing in new telephone technology, basically, and what will happen, it's already happening in some places. My doctors have just switched to it and it's amazing. Rather than constantly redial for half an hour, then hearing, no, there's no appointments, it will be, you're number 5 in the queue, you're number 6 in the queue, we'll ring you back. So you can literally put the phone down, get on with your day, and then they will ring you back. And then the idea is that they're training these care navigators, basically receptionists, people that work at the GPs. They'll take the call and then they will sort of triage you and work out whether you need to see a doctor, if you need to see an advanced nurse practitioner, maybe you should go direct to the pharmacy, maybe they think you should call 111. So the whole idea is that it will reduce the number of people needing to see the GP, and because obviously it will relieve pressure on GP services because it's phenomenally difficult to get seen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what's the general reaction to this been like then? Because, I mean, on paper, it sounds like a good idea, really.
Well, I think nobody's not going to be pleased not to be having to redial. But it is, of course, Labour would say it's tinkering around the edges, and it is something. But when you consider there's 7.2 million people waiting to begin NHS treatment, and, you know, one of the government's 5 priorities is to get these waiting lists down, when you consider that they haven't dealt with the strikes, that although some of the health unions have agreed, we've got some ambulance strikes tomorrow, the nurses are going to reballot for strikes, the junior doctors, that's nowhere near being settled. So, sure, this is great, but there's still huge problems that it's not really going to address. Now, the government's really keen to say we are delivering 10% more GP appointments than we were doing before the pandemic, per month, that is. But Labour are going, hang on a minute, we've got 2,000 GPs less than before you guys came to power. And the truth is that we're spending more money than ever on the NHS, and we're getting a worse service, aren't we?
So this would be another 240 million quid given to the NHS in order for it to try to do something with that money, and the public clearly would expect results on that. So in an ideal world, going forward, you will call your GP at 8 o'clock in the morning and you will be told that you're going to get a call back, and then that would work very efficiently. My concern about this would be with the receptionists. They're going to retrain 6,500 receptionists. I mean, with the best will in the world, it's a lot of pressure for a receptionist if someone rings up to get that decision right. Right, you need to see the GP, you need to call 111, you need to call 999, go to your pharmacist. I mean, fair enough if they get the training, but it's a lot of pressure.
It is, and not everyone is going to want to tell the receptionist what the problem is in the first place. And I mean, I have to say, very often they will ask you anyway, but at the moment the options are you see a doctor or you speak to a doctor or you see a nurse, but they don't say just ring 111 or go to the pharmacy or whatever. But we're expecting further announcements probably tomorrow about using pharmacies more, using their capacity, using their capability. They're obviously well qualified to give good advice. But the problem is figures that Labour have put out saying that 670 pharmacies have closed since 2015, along with 343 GPs. So there is a big problem with capacity. And of course, one of the reasons that this tax break was given to allow people to put more into their pension pots was an attempt to help to keep GPs and other doctors in the NHS rather than getting to a point and retiring or doing far fewer days because they've got so much money sitting in a pot. So we'll see.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine Forster there, our political reporter. What do you make of all of this then, ladies and gents? Do you think this could be the solution to the 8 a.m. nightmare at a GP surgery? Look, one would hope so. Certainly you might be able to actually get on the phone to somebody quicker, but will you actually get seen quicker? That's the big issue. Anyway, you are watching and listening to me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Now, following the pretty dismal set of results for Rishi Sunak's Conservatives at the local elections, have he and his party lost the working-class voters that Boris Johnson famously won over in 2019? Are they fully ready to back Keir Starmer for the next election? I am especially keen to hear from you on this. If you class yourself as working class and you voted Tory at the last election, where are you now? Have the Tory party lost you? If so, why? And have they lost you or has Labour won you, if you get what I mean? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Get in touch. But right now, it's your headlines.
It's 3:33. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB Newsroom. Here are the headlines. The Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children have joined millions of volunteers for the final day of coronation celebrations. The King's grandchildren have all been getting stuck in to help renovate a scout hut in Slough for the big help out. After a day of painting and digging, the 3 children toasted marshmallows and tried their hand at archery. Meanwhile, Princess Anne has met with local volunteers in Swindon. Some 6 million people are taking part in the big help out, either arranging their own community activities or working with charities. The Prime Minister, who's been preparing food at a village hall in Hertfordshire, has praised the weekend celebrations.
And it's community spirit like this that binds our country together. It's fantastic to be a part of it here today and help out myself. Now, on the weekend, I think no other country in the world could put on such a dazzling spectacle. And it was a proud expression of our history, our culture, our traditions, but also a reflection of the modern character of our country. It was deeply moving to be in the coronation service and incredibly uplifting. And it's an experience, I think, that nobody will forget for the rest of their lives.
The government says it'll give £240 million to GP practices this year to improve basic services and to end the so-called 8 a.m. scramble to get an appointment. The money will be used to introduce online booking tools and upgrade telephone systems. More receptionists will be trained with their role expanded so they can assess patients' needs. Ukraine says Russia has fired Iranian-made kamikaze drones at key cities, including over 30 at the capital, Kyiv. A food warehouse was set ablaze by a missile in the Black Sea port city of Odessa. Ukrainian officials say Russia has intensified shelling of Bakhmut, hoping to take it by tomorrow, their Victory Day holiday. Meanwhile, President Zelensky will meet with the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, tomorrow to discuss a new support package. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2648 and €1.1466. The price of gold is £1,601 and 14 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,778 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Well, after the weekend's coronation celebrations, ministers are finally coming to terms with the Conservative Party's brutal pummelling in the local elections on Thursday. So the Tories lost more than 1,000 local council seats, and pollsters now suggest that a hung parliament could be on the cards at the next general election. But have Labour snatched back the working class vote from the Tories? And this will be absolutely vital at that election. Who better to put this to than the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party? It is Lee Anderson, who is, of course, the MP for Ashfield. And Lee, again, vitally important to talk to you about this. Working class bloke, former Labour, now very much a Tory. But I just wonder, Lee, are you losing people like you, and why?
No, absolutely not, Patrick. It's interesting that the media is not reporting the actual gains we made in some of the red wall seats. Like my own, we won a seat in Ashfield for the first time in history. Next door in Mansfield, the number of Tory councillors went from 2 to 5. That's a massive increase, and now the official opposition in Mansfield, on Mansfield Council, and over in Bassetlaw, I think we're getting 2 or 3 Tory councillors as well. So, you know, it's not this picture that we're seeing. Yes, it's an awful sight on Friday, seeing over 1,000 councillors losing their jobs, obviously. But in some of the red wall areas like mine, we've actually made gains. So that encourages me. And I've always said, Patrick, that a lot of the red wall voters are working class voters, if you like, voted Conservative for the first time in 2019. 3 reasons, really: Boris, Brexit and Jeremy Corbyn. They're looking for an excuse to vote for us again. And if we get things right over the next year or so, then they will vote for us again. So I'm quietly confident that in areas like mine, we'll retain these seats.
I get that, but I mean, I'm looking at other areas, though, like Stoke-on-Trent, Jonathan Gullis's area. He's another regular on this channel. They were obliterated, really, it's fair to say. And I just wonder whether or not it is now because the Tories are losing them as opposed to Labour offering something in particular. And I just wonder whether or not, Lee, it is more of a question of competence and trust, because you know, the big one, stop the boats, that's not happening.
It's not. I mean, you're quite right. I think you're half right there, Patrick. I think people are fed up, not just with the main political parties. They're fed up full stop. I mean, look at the turnout at the local elections last week in some parts of Ashfield, just 20-odd%. You know, I think you're lucky anywhere in the country to find over 30%. So 70% of the actual electorate are not going out to vote. So they're a little bit fed up. And you're quite right about the small votes. It seems to be taking an age. I am encouraged by Rishi, because for the first time since I've been an MP, Rishi and Suella have given us something that no previous leadership gave us, and that was, if you arrive here illegally, you will not be able to claim asylum. You'll be swiftly detained and returned to either your own country or a third country like Rwanda. So that gives me hope. Yes, it winds me up. It's frustrating it's taking so long. But you know what? In over a year's time, the British electorate have got a decision to make. Who do you want running this country and this economy? Do you want Rishi and Jeremy Hunt, or Sir Keir and Angela Rayner? And I think once people go into the ballot box and look at those names on the paper, they'll make the right decision.
Yeah, but I think you can fit a Rizzler paper between the kind of economics, to be honest with you, at the moment, depressingly, from what's coming out at Jeremy Hunt's mouth and what may well come out of the Labour Party's mouth. And at the moment, you know, the Labour Party's obviously got rid of Jeremy Corbyn in the kind of wacky magic grandpa element of it, which I think turned a lot of people off, especially in the north of England, right? It just did. So they've not got that now. So if they're looking at it and thinking, well, neither party is going to make me richer. At the next election, I am not going to be able to say that voting Tory is going to make me richer. Then they might as well just go and do what their dad did and their granddad did and just vote Labour.
Well, Rishi is no mug, Patrick. This is a man who was, in 2015 came into Parliament and now is a Prime Minister of this great country. He's a very clever man. He's a businessman. He's got a good head on his shoulders. And yes, we have been spending a little bit too much money over the past few years. We've had the pandemic, obviously the war in Ukraine, and the tax situation is not ideal. We're supposed to be a low tax party. That's what we want to be. But I'm pretty confident now that Rishi has steadied the ship, that throughout this year and early next year, there will be tax cuts. We will be selling the Conservative dream to the great British people. And then
what is that dream, Lee? Just sell it now. Just sell it now. All right. I want to talk directly to working class people, not just in the north of England, but this is where the Red Wall gets a lot of coverage, right? But working class people everywhere who voted for you at the last election, who have just gone out and voted Labour in the local elections, or dare I say it, even Lib Dem or Green in some cases. I mean, that was like the ultimate protest vote, wasn't it? Sell the Tory dream to those people.
Well, they haven't, Patrick. I think you're wrong in what you just said there. A lot of, they're not going back to the Labour Party, the Conservative, the first-time Tory voters. I speak to them on a daily basis. I live in the real world, as you well know. And they're a little bit grumpy. Yes, they're a little bit fed up, but they're saying to me, come on, Lee, get your party to get the act together. We want to vote for you again next year. They're not going out at the local elections last year and switching votes from Labour to Conservative. I suspect that many of our voters last week actually stayed at home. And that's a sad truth, Patrick. But if you want to sell the Conservative dream is quite simple. It's putting more money in people's pockets. And if we get that right next year with tax cuts and incentives for small businesses, etc., then we should be OK. I absolutely believe that, 100%.
All right, Lee, look, appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much. Lee Anderson there, who is, of course, the Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party and, indeed, of this parish. Also, as well, MP for Ashfield. Interesting emails coming in. Just time for one here. This is from Dawn. He says that Labour cannot win me. I am a woman, quote, adult human female. And this is alluding to the fact that Keir Starmer has previously struggled to say what a woman is. Really, but there we go. Now, you are watching and listening to Patrick Christys right here on GB News, and coming up, I will be debating, is the monarchy too white? Well, according to a Bridgerton actress, the Buckingham Palace balcony was, quote, terribly white, shockingly white on Coronation Day. What do you think? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen. Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
OK, so the crowning of Charles III was the most diverse in the 1,000-year history of the ceremony, reflecting the King's desire to celebrate all aspects of multicultural Britain. But it seems to not be enough for some people. Bridgerton star Adjoa Andoh has called the momentous balcony scene, quote, terribly white. And the actress says the appearance of the royal family contrasted starkly with the Westminster Abbey ceremony, which showed rich diversity. So, were the events of the weekend too white? Is our royal family too white? Joining me to discuss this now is social policy analyst Dr. Rakib Hassan, an activist and organiser of Black Lives Matter protests. It is Iman Ayton. Great stuff, both of you. Thank you very much. Rakib, is the royal family too white?
Well, firstly, I think that the coronation was a wonderful celebration of not only the country's Christian heritage, but also its status as a proud multi-faith democracy. And I think the coronation itself, it reflected King Charles III's, I would say, multicultural values, where he sees Britain as a community of communities and sees himself as the defender of all faiths, despite being the Supreme Governor of the Church of England. So I found those comments particularly unsavoury. We are, in my view, a relatively successful multiracial democracy. The reality is that monoracial families are the norm in modern-day Britain. But that's not to say that we don't have positive race relations. So I did find the comments bizarre, and I did find them a tad divisive, I have to say.
Iman, I'll bring you in now. Iman Ayton, who is an activist, organiser of the Black Lives Matter protests. I just wonder what the rules are here, Iman, because if I'd have been looking at and commentating on a similar ceremony somewhere, say, in Nigeria or an African country, and I'd have said, gosh, that balcony looks terribly black, I'd be a racist, wouldn't I?
Oh, yes. Without the context, right. Patrick, oh, wow, you would be. Let's just make that clear. So in terms of what I think she was trying to do, well, firstly, she did highlight and state the obvious. And again, without context, it can be easily kind of perceived as racist. But again, let's just take into consideration that the monarchy represents white supremacy. So one would expect that there would be lots of white people. So for me personally, I actually thought the comment was somewhat unnecessary. I wouldn't necessarily say divisive, but we're somewhere. Well,
I'll come back to you off the back of this, Iman, because I want to give this context properly. And I believe we do have a clip now of this Bridgerton actress, Adjoa Andoh, who was making this comment. Let's play the clip and then we'll react to it.
There is a bit of me that we've gone from the rich diversity of the Abbey to a terribly white balcony. I'm very struck by that. I'm also looking at those younger generations and thinking, what are the nuances that they will inhabit as they grow? Nuances that Charles has exhibited from a teenage into early 20s young man.
The implication there for me, Iman, is that there is something wrong with that balcony being white.
No, see, it's so interesting you say that, in spite of the fact that your channel has literally spoken about Meghan Markle for like a year. So just to put it into context, what I personally think she's referring to is the lack of diversity, due to the fact that I agree, we can all concede on the fact that this is a multicultural society. So therefore, where's the representation on the balcony? And then last but not least, where's Meghan Markle, the half black, half white person?
Well, she decided not to come.
To that dynamic, right? I think that's where she's going with those two things, in all honesty. Context, guys.
But Meghan was invited. Meghan, I mean, this is the thing I don't quite understand, Rakib.
Archie's birthday.
It was Archie's birthday. I believe, unless I'm mistaken, that they weren't as massively keen on it. What?
Patrick, as a woman, I just have to say, as a woman, yes, I have a vagina. I know that will both make you smile. As a woman, with your anti-woke narrative about transgender. Yes, I thought I'd add that point. As a woman, just so you know, it's a big deal if your child has a birthday. You might want to be there. You might want to cuddle him or her all day
I understand
and go on
that.
about your life. So Meghan did what
I do understand that, but I wonder whether or not, Iman, though, that those children, when they look back on it, might have actually quite liked to have spent a birthday celebration at a coronation or around the coronation. Dr. Rakib, I'll bring you into this discussion now. Then, what do you think that she meant when she was saying that the balcony was terribly white? Because I think the last time I checked the census, I believe that Britain is around an 85% white nation, or England and Wales is about 85% white. I mean, it's not really a shock that our royal family is white, is it?
No, it's not a shock, Patrick. It's still, even though we have a relatively diverse democracy, it's still very much a white majority society. Perhaps she was alluding to Meghan Markle's absence. I have seen some, what I'll just be quite substandard commentary surrounding Meghan Markle. I think the truth is, I think that, if I'm being completely honest, I think some of the treatment she did receive was unfair. But ultimately, I think the issue that we have is that you have some progressives saying, "Oh, it'd be really nice for Meghan to be there because she's mixed race." Meghan Markle is not simply a mixed race woman that you can just wheel out for royal diversity optics. She's an individual in her own right. She has her own goals and wants. I think the issue is that many of her goals and wants were somewhat incompatible with her duties and responsibilities that come with being a senior working royal. So unfortunately, that particular arrangement simply didn't work out. But I think on the whole, I'd reiterate this point, I thought the coronation was a fantastic celebration of our multi-ethnic, religiously diverse democracy. I enjoyed the inclusion of the gospel choir, which I thought was very important, considering many of our black communities are helping to keep Christianity alive. The rapidly secularized mainstream, they're keeping Christianity alive in inner city areas, towns such as mine, my hometown of Luton, but even places like Swindon in Wiltshire, Thurrock in Essex, Medway in Kent. So I felt that on the whole, I thought the coronation was a splendid celebration. And I think comments like that, I'd have to agree that I think they were unnecessary. Some people might not thought they were divisive, but I'd say that they were.
Yeah, Iman, the fact is that those white people on the balcony, certainly one of them in particular, the King, was responsible for pretty much every different element of that service that we saw inside Westminster Abbey. And that service did include a Hindu man reading a prayer. There was a Greek Orthodox priest. There was a rabbi. There was, I believe, a black lady bishop as well. There was a black choir. So the idea that there's some problem with that kind of old white bloke on the balcony because of his race and what that might mean about his attitudes towards race, surely was completely discredited by what we'd literally just seen before.
No, I actually want to concede with many points that you've made in the past about this virtue signalling that keeps happening, and it's just a toxic infection on our society, where it's a lot easier for organisations and institutions to offer language guides and change words and have a few black people at the front or singing a song or two than it is to actually change an entire culture and practices, policies and procedures. So that's what I put that down to. I ultimately put down the coronation sums up wealth, class, privilege, pedantry and power, which disguises the thieving, raping, genocidal aspects of the empire. That's ultimately what we saw.
Just talk to me about that then, Iman, just quickly. Yeah, just quickly, because we're pressed for time. So this is where I get a bit confused, right? Because if the royal family were to crowbar in more diversity on that balcony, that would be seen as tokenism, wouldn't it, and condemned by you. But then also the fact that there weren't any people of ethnic minority backgrounds on that balcony is also a bad thing. And can you understand why maybe people feel a bit confused and like you can't win?
No, you've completely confused my point. So let me just make it dead clear. When you have black people advocating for white supremacy in the absence of actually changing a culture and making things better for the black community, it is nothing but tokenism and virtue signaling. So yes, if there was loads of black people on the balcony, but yet you haven't adopted anti-racism, you haven't apologised for slavery, you haven't offered reparations, and all of these things are nothing but tokenism, virtue signaling. Please look at me, I'm so much more woke than the last.
So that's okay. Fine. So
right, this is what King Charles is about, right?
Okay, I get you. So that's a key point for us to end on, Dr. Rakib. I'll bring you in for the final word on this. If King Charles really is about white supremacy coming off the back of a culture that trampled all over people from different races all over the world, does need to pay reparations and apologise, until that happens, no one's going to be happy. Does he have to do that, Dr. Rakib? I say no. Well, Dr. Rakib, does he have to do that?
Well, ultimately, King Charles III will decide what kind of head of state he wants to be. And the reality is that we are seeing a growing Republican movement in countries such as Jamaica and St. Kitts and Nevis as well.
Mhm.
So he will have to negotiate that. But I do think that this king, especially through the Prince's Trust, for example, which does some fantastic charitable work throughout the Commonwealth, I think that he recognises that there are tensions there and there are issues which need to be addressed. But I think on the whole, by the way, he got a great right wing, but he got a great deal of the final point I made, he made a great deal. He received a great deal of right wing criticism over the diverse nature of the coronation and the fact that he's entertaining the possibility that there should be an investigation into the royal family's historic links with the slave trade. I actually think that his approach isn't half bad.
Everyone knows this. You have to be living in a cave not to know that that the monarchy is linked to slavery. You literally have to be.
Well, as far as we can tell, the thing that links the monarchy to slavery dates back to around 1869, and it's one letter with a bit of shares. And Iman, I don't think I'm going to have time for this, but surely just paying reparations implies that ethnic minorities can be bought off.
No, it actually doesn't. What it does is it sorts out the issue of colonialism. You see, these countries have colonialism interwoven into their countries. And so in order to unpick themselves from their banking system, education system, all of which are British, they need billions. Therefore, not millions, billions. Therefore,
we are going to have to leave it.
So it helps with colonialism. That's
all right, we're about to be cut off, but both of you, thank you very much. That was Iman Aiton there, who is, of course, organiser of Black Lives Matter protest, and Dr. Akiba Hassan, who is a social policy expert. Right, that's all from me for this hour, but keep yourselves locked and loaded for another rip-roaring hour here with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back. It's just gone 4 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and here is what I've got coming your way this hour. We heard a little bit at the end of the last one, but are the royals too white? Criticism levelled at the royal family for, yes, being too white, but they are the royal family of this country, and we are mostly white. So what's the problem there? Moving on. Were the police too heavy-handed? They moved in quickly and preemptively to round up a load of would-be protesters at the coronation. Now there's talk of the police being sued for their actions, but did they do the right thing? In other news, good news for homeowners, is it? 100% mortgages are being offered for the first time since 2008, but could you find yourself getting into a bit of hot water? All you would-be homeowners out there, this one's for you. Moving on, the working class. Have the working class left the Tories? A lot of working class people lent the Tories their vote at the last general election. Has that gone? But I want to know, if you are working class and you did vote Tory, will you be voting for them next time or not? And have the Tories lost your vote rather than Labour winning it? Key distinction. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Let's go. Get those emails coming in on all of those top topics. GBViews at gbnews.uk. And also, I went out and about earlier and met what we are affectionately calling Patrick's people. Yes. And spoke to them about a couple of issues. Firstly, whether or not they think our royal family is too white. Some really interesting answers to that. And another cheeky little one for you at the end. What would you do if you won the lottery? Some lucky bloke won 40 million quid over the weekend. I'd be dead in a week. Patrick Christys, GB News. News.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. The Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children have joined millions of volunteers for the final day of coronation celebrations today. The King's grandchildren have all been getting stuck in to help renovate a scout hut in Slough in Berkshire for the big help out. Prince William giving Prince Louis a lesson in operating a digger, and then all 3 children having a go at some archery. Meanwhile, Princess Anne has met with local volunteers in Swindon in Wiltshire. 6 million people is believed are taking part in the big help out, either arranging their own community activities or working alongside charities. And the Prime Minister, who's been preparing food at a village hall in Hertfordshire, praised the weekend's celebrations and efforts.
And it's community spirit like this that binds our country together. It's fantastic to be a part of it here today and help out myself. Now, on the weekend, I think no other country in the world could put on such a dazzling spectacle. And it was a proud expression of our history, our culture, our traditions, but also a reflection of the modern character of our country. It was deeply moving to be in the coronation service and incredibly uplifting. And it's an experience, I think, that nobody will forget for the rest of their lives.
Rishi Sunak. Well, the Met Police will be facing some questioning over the arrests they made during the King's coronation. That's amid concerns a clampdown affected the right to protest. 64 people were arrested, including from the anti-monarchy group Republic and environmental activist group Just Stop Oil. The government defended the police response following complaints officers had gone too far. Now, the government says it'll give £240 million to GP practices this year to improve basic services and to end the so-called 8 a.m. scramble to get an appointment. The money will be used to introduce an online booking service and upgrade telephone systems. More receptionists will be trained, with their role expanded to speed up the booking process. But the Shadow Health Minister, Andrew Gwynn, told GB News more still needs to be done.
There's nothing in it that will train more doctors, that will enable patients to use a face-to-face appointment, or that will bring back the family GP. It's a very shallow tinkering around at the edges. What we really ought to have had was the government's workforce strategy, something we've been calling for on the Labour benches for some time, that sets out how we are going to get the extra doctors, the extra staff in the NHS that we need to be able to transform the NHS into the service we want it to be.
Well, in international news, Ukraine says Russia has fired 60 Iranian-made kamikaze drones at key cities, including over 30 in the capital. A food warehouse was set alight by a missile in the Black Sea port of Odessa. Ukrainian officials say Russia has intensified the shelling of Bakhmut, hoping to take it by tomorrow, their Victory Day holiday. Meanwhile, President Zelensky will meet the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, tomorrow to discuss a new support package. Former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko says the Russian aggression must stop.
we have destroyed civilian object, and this is just very easy to understand. Putin does not stop shelling Ukraine, and the only way how we can stop Putin is our joint victory, like we do in the Second World War. Today there was anti-Hitler coalition. Today we create the anti-Putin coalition.
Now, a man has been remanded in custody charged with attempted murder after an attack on a 71-year-old woman in Worcester. 56-year-old Anthony Roberts was also charged with sexual assault and possession of a bladed article in a public place. The woman was attacked near the River Severn last night and remains in a critical condition in hospital. Roberts will appear in court next month. The First Minister of Scotland has been accused of negligence for delaying a mental health pledge. The proposal aimed to recruit an additional 1,000 mental health workers and provide every GP practice with access to a wellbeing service by 2026. But it's been paused due to so-called difficult decisions in November's emergency budget review. The Scottish Labour Party says mental health is low on the government's priority list, but the government says it is committed to improving the service. And lastly, a bill calling for companies to follow a code of practice while removing unsafe cladding from buildings is due to be tabled in Parliament. Residents in a tower block in Ipswich claimed they were deprived of fresh air and natural light when a construction company removing the dangerous cladding wrapped the building in shrink wrap without informing them. Conservative MP Tom Hunt is introducing the Cladding Remediation Works Bill, calling for better communication with residents and a clear timescale. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
Right, let's start off with our top topic today. And is the royal family too white? That's a phrase I never thought I'd say, given the fact that around 85% of people in England and Wales are indeed white, and our royal family are, of course, just white. And from my recollection, Meghan Markle turned down an invitation to have potentially been on the balcony. But there we go. One Bridgerton actress was absolutely adamant that the balcony was terribly white at the coronation. Joanne Doe has caused massive controversy saying it. We had a debate on it earlier, so I thought I'd go out and about and ask ordinary people on the street what they think about it. Do they think that our royal family is too white?
Honest now, the inherent racism of the royal family, I think, is just really obvious for everybody to see. Like the way that not only the press has treated Meghan Markle, but actually, like, we know from what's been discussed about, like, the way that the royals have thrown specific people under the bus and things like that, that it's not just a question, to my mind, of whether, like, you can make it more diverse in terms of, like, you know, marrying people like Meghan Markle or whatever it is, but actually, like, the institution itself is endemically racist.
But I feel like there was a lot of different cultures in the church as well. You know, they had those like soul singers as well and stuff like that. I know that's not directly in the royal family, but I think it was a diverse day. But yeah, married into the family, obviously there's not a lot of...
Do you think it's unreasonable that the royal family, the royal family of, like, this country is mostly white? I mean, it's just a thing, isn't it?
I don't think it's unreasonable. I don't think it would be... I mean, I don't know, it's hard to tell because obviously Meghan wasn't accepted by them, so maybe it would put other royals off in the future by having someone of a different ethnic background. I'm not sure.
I really don't have any thoughts about it. I don't really care about that. I mean, I'm an American. The whole idea of a royal family is kind of outdated, but I mean, they were there for like, what, 1,000 years now?
Yeah. Well, it's genetics, really. That's the best I can say about it.
Do you think it's an odd thing for people to be focusing on the day of the coronation and stuff?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, well, it's the genetics of the royal family, that's all I can say.
I get the impression you think it's laughable that people might be a bit concerned.
Yeah, it's silly. It's silly. Yeah, that's all I can say about it, really.
Yeah, and I mean, that's about that, isn't it, really? It's genetics and a bit silly, really. So there we go. Jenny Bond joins me now, who's, of course, a royal journalist. Jenny, thank you very much for joining me. I mean, it was a fantastic day, wasn't it, the coronation? And the coronation concert last night was great. I mean, they did manage to rake up a few B-list singers for my liking, but we won't dwell on that far too much. What did you make initially of these comments, then, that the balcony was terribly white?
Well, it's a very difficult subject, isn't it? But I do think that last night William made a punchy, pointed and significant speech. I mean, we've all kind of focused on him saying how proud he was of his father, but he went out of his way to say that King Charles has all his life sought to include people from all faiths, all communities, all backgrounds. And I think that was William saying, we are not a racist family, which is something he has said before. It was really significant, I think, and very significant that William chose that enormously public platform to commit himself to a life of service to his king, his country, and the Commonwealth. I think it's on a par with when the Queen made her commitment when she was 21 to serve for the rest of her life. So I think that speech was absolutely key to a man who is a king in waiting now.
The big thing that keeps coming up time and time again, and we heard it in those Vox Pops there, which was the way Meghan Markle was treated, quotes unquote, proves that the royal family has a race problem, and then you see a load of white people on the balcony. And the fundamental issue there is whether or not Meghan Markle was treated poorly because of the colour of her skin, or frankly, just because people didn't like her.
Well, you know, that debate will rage and people are utterly divided on that. The fact of the matter is she has left the UK. She hasn't left the royal family completely. She was invited to come to the coronation. She could have come. She could have brought her children if she'd wished to do so. And I think having seen some of the extended family on the balcony, actually, rather beyond what we expected, which was just the key working royals, but in fact there were the page boys were there, and Princess Alexandra, who is not really a working royal anymore, particularly given her great age, she was there. So I think there was a chance that Harry and Meghan possibly could have been on that balcony, but it was her choice to stay back. And I completely get that because it was Archie's 4th birthday. And I think it was very touching that in the reception at Buckingham Palace, King Charles raised a glass to all his grandchildren and particularly to wish Archie a happy birthday. And rather sadly, he apparently sort of said, wherever he is. That's tough for a grandpa.
Just one more quick one with you, Jenny, if that's all right, which is, just on that note of Prince Harry, I wonder whether or not he is depriving his children of the chance to be part of something really, really special, and only time will tell whether or not they grow up to resent him for that.
Well, yeah, that's true. Time will tell. Yes, it's a shame that he feels that he can't be happy here with his family, but that is the way it is, and I personally wish him the best. I think Meghan showed him an exit door that he did not know existed, did not know was possible, and they are now very happy in California, and I wish them well.
OK, look, Jenny, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Jenny Bond there, royal commentator. I made a comment about this on the Saturday 8 till 9 p.m. every single Saturday right here on GB News, where I said I just wonder what kind of job Prince Harry is doing for his children. I'd be keen to get your views on this. Obviously, he made some comments about the Taliban, didn't he, which has riled up a lot of activist elements amongst the radical Islamist community. I don't think that's a particularly good thing to do for your kids, because that will hang like a millstone around their neck for the rest of their lives. But also, what kind of message are they getting? You know, they've got on the one side there Meghan Markle, who doesn't appear to have much of a relationship with any of her family. Then you've got Harry's side. Again, he doesn't appear to have much of a relationship with any of his family. He spent around 28 hours in the UK on 2 flights, racking up around 15 tonnes of CO2 emissions, of course. What kind of message is that sending out to his children, I wonder? But meanwhile, 6 million people across the country are joining voluntary events today at the Big Help Out, a national event to mark the Coronation Bank holiday. And our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody is at a Scouts facility in Liskeard in Cornwall, and it's absolutely hammering it down. Jeff, what's going on?
Patrick, I've had some great gigs working with you, haven't I, over the past year? I'm not sure this is one of them. It's pouring down with rain here and we're picking up litter. But you know what? As my grandma used to say, after the Lord Mayor's show comes the dust cart. It's got to be done. I'm here with the first Liskeard Scouts in Cornwall. We've been out for most of the day in the pouring rain, picking up litter, and we're nearly there. But let's have a talk to one of the organisers. Lisa, you got the boss written on your back there, so you're the one I need to be talking to.
Hello.
Hello. It's going well, isn't it, so far today, apart from the rain?
can't help it. But as scouts, we're always prepared. So waterproofs, waterproof coats. So no one's going to get soaked.
Yeah, well, you can see I'm not a scout.
Not at all, no.
Now, how engaged have you found younger people in the coronation?
Really well this year. Obviously, I don't know about the others, but lots of schools have taken part in doing lots of activities, making pictures and things. Us as a scout group, we have done flags and pictures. The scouts made papier-mâché images of the King, which was really entertaining. And that was put on at the British Legion, which we all sort of did our bit taking part. Some of the children have won some prizes from that as well. So that's been really, really good. Scouting with the coronation, they provided badges for all the children. Obviously we had to pay for them. So they've got a badge that they can sew onto their uniform for a year, or then it can go onto their blanket afterwards. So.
Excellent. Hello everyone, we've all gathered together. How are we going? How full is our litter bin here? That's quite full, isn't it? Have you had a good day, everyone?
Yeah.
Yes. What do we all think of King Charles III?
Good. Yeah. Very good.
Good.
Very
Shall we have a big round of God Save the King?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
God save the King!
God Save the King. Back to you.
Thank you, Jeff. I mean, well done. Jeff Moody there, who is reporting and simultaneously managing to combine what looks like actual community service with his day job as well. So, Jeff Moody there with a load off scouts. Thank you very much. That's part of the big help out, though, of course, and everyone's getting involved and you love to see it. But meanwhile, France's President Emmanuel Macron has this morning laid a wreath of flowers down in Paris on the tomb of the unknown soldier. So the ceremony took place at the Arc de Triomphe and is one of many that will take place to mark the Allied victory against Nazi Germany. And I think it's really important that today, with all the coronation talk and with everything else that we're doing, that we don't miss this, OK? Because this is actually a really momentous day. And let's speak now to GB News' South East reporter, Ray Addison, who joins us from the Royal British Legion. Ray, great stuff. Thank you. What's going on where you are?
Hey there, Patrick. Yes, the bunting's been out all weekend here at the Wickham Marsh branch of the Royal British Legion here in Buckinghamshire. And, of course, marking both the coronation of King Charles III and today, the 78th anniversary of VE Day, the end of World War II in Europe. And I'm joined now by Iris Lofty, who was there to watch the celebrations all the way back in 1945. Iris, you were 8 on that day. What can you remember about that time?
I could just remember the villagers all turning out because we had a big party in the meadow opposite where we lived. And I remember sitting under the table where the ice cream tub was.
And there must have been an enormous sense of relief and joy.
There was, yes, a lot.
Why is it important that we remember those times, VE Day, and, of course, the sacrifices that were made for our freedom of the World War II generation?
You've got to remember that if it hadn't been for those people, none of us would be here today. And that means a lot to me. And I've been out to the war graves, and I think everybody should attend and go there to see how many people were lost. Just, you know, what they hear is not enough. You need to go and see it. Sorry, Frank.
That's all right. It must be very emotional for you to remember. Now, of course, in terms of your own service, you served for 4 years in the Territorial Army, as it was then called. Yeah. It's now the Army Reserves. What do you remember about that time, and why did you want to serve?
Why? Because I'm a royalist, and it was something for my Queen and for the country, and I don't know, just a feeling that I needed to do something at the time, and I enjoyed it very much.
And you were telling me earlier you were a bit of a tomboy back then.
Oh, yeah. What I loved about it was we'd done the assault courses, and also we used to go out midnight right out in the country. We used to have to crawl through fields and go through villages and try not to wake the dogs up because they would give us away that we were there. And one thing I do remember was coming back one morning along the Western Avenue, thumbing a lift to get back to Harrow, and a coach pulled up, and we were all muddy, but they said, "Come on." And when we got on it, they were all German tourists.
Oh, treasured memories.
I always remember that. We was coming up the Western Avenue with all the Germans there. They wondered what us crazy lot were all about. We were all women. And yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your service, Iris. Really appreciate it. We're also joined by Sarah Sturt, who's the County Secretary for Buckinghamshire of the Royal British Legion. Sarah, thanks very much for having us here, welcoming GB News. Tell us what's been going on here today and why are you holding this event?
So we've held this event for celebrating the coronation and obviously 78 years of VE Day. It's basically a community event where the Royal British Legion supports obviously our veterans, our members, our supporters and volunteers. The main point is the Poppy Appeal, and we've got other organisations that are in the community here today. So we've got the Wickham Food Hub, which is our local food hub where you can go and get your food if you're struggling with affording poverty and everything. And then lots of micro businesses also from the area are here, and the idea is to raise some money to give back to the Royal British Legion to help with veterans and everything. Okay.
Sarah, thank you so much for having us here today. Sorry we got so little time to chat to you, but in terms of volunteering, of course, the Royal British Legion is saying if you want to get involved in the big help out and help out the Royal British Legion, then head on down to your local branch because they always need volunteers to help with their Poppy Appeal, Patrick.
Ray, thank you very much. Ray Addison there. And it's really important, I think, not to lose the Allied victory against Nazi Germany and all the stuff that we're talking about in light of the coronation, the police's response to the coronation as well, and a few other issues like home ownership we're going to be talking about a little bit later on as well, and, all of that stuff. I think it's quite important to mark that, so thank you very, very much. Ray, who was from the Royal British Legion. Right, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Plenty more to come, so don't go anywhere, and including that topic is whether or not the police were too heavy-handed during the coronation. Do you agree with the preemptive arrest, or do you think it's a very worrying precedent being set for free speech in this country? Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So, 64 people were arrested on Saturday as part of the coronation policing operation, including 13 people to prevent a breach of the peace, which was, well, it has caused some controversy, hasn't it? One of the anti-monarchy groups protesting was called Republic, and they said that the arrests were premeditated to, quote, disrupt and diminish the demonstration. The controversy here centres around whether or not the police genuinely were acting on information and intelligence, and they genuinely thought there was going to be some kind of seismic threat to proceedings and a threat to those around them, in which case I think we can probably all agree that's great. Or whether or not the police thought, we don't like the look of you and we don't fancy dealing with you today, so we're going to lift you. In which case, whilst I can still understand a lot of people's sentiments about it, thinking, well, they were maybe inappropriate to protest at the coronation, that is worrying for free speech. GBviews at gbnews.uk, where are you on this issue? Here for more, though, is Graham Wetton, who's a former Met police officer, and they spelt out the Met then, Graham, it shows where I'm at. It's been a long weekend. Graham, were the police right to step in and preemptively arrest a load of people?
I think, Patrick, you alluded to it there. I think it depends basically on what information or suspicions, information, etc. they had on the day itself. There are no choice, or there's no opportunity here for second guessing it. You can't almost like give the benefit of the doubt or wait and see what's going to happen. This was such a big event. Imagine the debate we'd be having now if actually they'd stopped and detained someone who they thought was going to disrupt the protest. They then let them go on their way, and they did then disrupt the procession.
But is it legal, Graham? This is the thing. Is it legal, or is it just a case of, look, we're going to arrest you and we're going to come up with some kind of excuse for it later?
I don't think it's a case of coming up with an excuse later. They obviously had some grounds to stop and detain some people and then actually detain them further by taking them to a police station. There are, as you see on the screen now, there are a couple of hundred people in the actual protest against the procession, against the monarchy. So there's obviously a significant number of people allowed to go onto that protest. But there was a smaller number who they felt they couldn't run the risk of or let them go to that protest because they obviously suspected they were likely to cause some form of disruption. And disruption could form anything. It could actually be just like almost throwing things towards the horses. Anything at all. Imagine if they'd let that person go there and we were now talking about a disruption to the procession.
Yeah, that's, I think, really where a lot of people are, Graham. One individual claims to have been arrested on suspicion of carrying eggs, which is bizarre, but when you actually think about who he is, he's a guy called Patrick Thelwell, who famously threw eggs at the king previously. And it's facial recognition technology that apparently was able to identify this individual and he says anyway he was arrested as a result of it. So that's the kind of intel, isn't it? And is it not reasonable to preemptively arrest somebody like that? There is almost every chance that an individual might go on and do something.
Why would you go to the coronation with a load of eggs in your pocket and you've previously thrown eggs at the king and been arrested for it and charged with it? So why would you actually turn up there? If you're found by the police, then you're going to get arrested for that because you're there to, I'd imagine then, throw the eggs again at the coaches that went past. That could cause all sorts of issues. So for me, that's completely right for the police to react to that, preemptively arrest, remove them. It's far easier to remove the problem and almost like accept it and then see what happens.
Yeah, I just also want to go to extreme lengths now to say, as far as we're not aware as to whether or not this individual did have any eggs on him or anything like that, so make that abundantly clear for people. But Graham, could this not play into the hands of an authoritarian state? So let's say I wanted to protest about something that I actually really care deeply about, right? And for whatever reason, the government of the day or the head of the police of the day decided that protest went against their ideas of norms, then you and I could get lifted for that. And so actually, that's a problem, isn't it?
I don't think so. I don't think it's going to come to that. I think we see you've only got to look back in the last couple of weeks, months, couple of years. There are protests on the streets of London and across the UK on all sorts of things. So we don't live anything like that sort of state, authoritarian state where you're not allowed to protest. You are, as long as you keep it lawful and peaceful and abide by the laws. If you're going to come up and disrupt someone else's event, then you're likely to come to the notice of police and they're likely to take action against you to prevent you from disrupting whatever it is you're there to protest against.
Graham, thank you. Graham Wetton there, former Met police officer, just reacting to those arrests that were made and whether or not the police were too heavy-handed. Now, as rent costs continue to spiral, trapping young people in the rental market and making it even more difficult to get on the housing ladder, there may be a light at the end of the tunnel. Mortgage lenders are set to start offering 100% home loans for the first time since the 2008 financial crisis. Skipton Building Society will be one of those to launch this offer. To talk us through this in more depth, I'm joined by mortgage advisor Ray Bulger. Ray, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. A 100% mortgage. Is this as good as it sounds?
Well, clearly it's only going to be available to people who've got a good credit rating. At the moment, you can get a 95% mortgage at rates a little under 5%. So I think if we get 100% mortgages coming into the market, and Skipton haven't said for certain they're going to do this, they've implied they're going to launch it, and I think it's still months away rather than weeks away. So you're probably looking at about 5.5% as an interest rate. And absolutely, the key thing for people looking to buy, and clearly this is going to be mainly first-time buyers, is what is affordable. And if the mortgage is affordable, then there's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't go ahead with a 100% mortgage. I think the fear that most people have of 100% mortgages, whether it's buyers or commentators, is negative equity. But I think this should be put in perspective. If you're renting, you're normally in permanent fear that your landlord is going to ask you to move out after 6 months. So you've got to compare the alternatives. And so I think as long as it's affordable, absolutely 100% mortgages will help a lot of first-time buyers.
I just wonder if we've been here before, Ray. We've been here before where they go, OK, we'll give you a 100% mortgage or even a 95% mortgage from people who clearly, by definition, have not been able to save up a load of money for a deposit, OK? And then something happens and those people are potentially only one missed paycheck, which is easily done, one missed paycheck away from not being able to repay their mortgage. And do we not end up, dare I say it, back where we were in 2008, and this can trigger some kind of global financial crash?
No, the problems in 2008 were not caused by people with 100% mortgages. They were caused by UK banks and others recklessly buying US mortgage-backed securities, which were just poor value. So I think one needs to put this in perspective. And you're absolutely right, of course. If people have a problem, which normally comes either from a relationship breakdown, if it's a joint mortgage, or people losing their job, then obviously they may struggle to pay their mortgage. So people should always aim to have, say, 3 months' worth of expenses ideally available if they can. But clearly that's not always practical. But the problem you've outlined applies in exactly the same way if you have a 90% mortgage or a 95% mortgage. The difference is the bigger the deposit you've got, the more flexibility you've got if things go wrong. So that's why 100% mortgages are only going to be offered to people who've got a really good credit rating.
Interesting. Ray, thank you very much. Short and sweet, but to the point, and that's what we love. Ray Bulger there, who is, of course, a mortgage advisor, and I just think that's really interesting. Of course, the big solution is to just build more houses, isn't it? We need to build more houses. On that note, of course, it's a rather good idea that the Liberal Democrats have won on a platform of blocking planning permission in local areas, but there we go. You are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Plenty more to come, including, oh, here we go, a Labour-Lib Dem coalition. Now, this is being rumbled that it could happen at the next general election. Would it mean a second Brexit referendum? I'll be discussing that in just a moment, but right now, headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. The Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children have been joining millions of volunteers for the final day of coronation celebrations. The King's grandchildren have been renovating a scout hut in Berkshire for the big help out. And after a day of painting and digging, they then toasted marshmallows and tried their hands at a bit of archery. The Prime Minister, who's been preparing food at a village hall in Hertfordshire, praised the weekend's efforts.
And it's community spirit like this that binds our country together. It's fantastic to be a part of it here today and help out myself. Now, on the weekend, I think no other country in the world could put on such a dazzling spectacle. And it was a proud expression of our history, our culture, our traditions, but also a reflection of the modern character of our country. It was deeply moving to be in the coronation service and incredibly uplifting. And it's an experience, I think, that nobody will forget for the rest of their lives.
Rishi Sunak. Well, the government plans to give £240 million to GP practices this year to improve basic services. The money will be used to end the so-called 8 a.m. scramble to get an appointment and introduce an online booking system instead. Receptionists will also have additional roles to speed up the booking process. Ukraine has accused Russia of firing Iranian-made drones at multiple cities, including over 30 at the capital, Kyiv. Officials also claim that Russia plans to take control of the key city of Bakhmut by tomorrow, which is their Victory Day holiday. Meanwhile, President Zelensky will meet with the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, tomorrow to discuss a new support package. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, obviously, the results of a local election don't necessarily dictate how a general election goes, but it can be quite a useful indicator as to where the country is. And I think we can all see, can't we, that it's reasonable to expect Labour to do certainly much better than they did last time around in the next general election. But if it is going to be a hung parliament, some people are predicting that it is. If it is going to be a hung parliament, could that mean that Labour get into bed with the Lib Dems? And what would that mean? So could Brexit be on the line, depending on the result of this election? So following those local election results, which saw parties snatch seats from the Tories, the Liberal Democrats have hinted that they would be willing to enter into a coalition with Labour. And I actually had Vince Cable on Friday, and former leader of the Liberal Democrats, and he hinted exactly this. He said that they were willing to go into a coalition with somebody. Well, let's be honest, it's not going to be the Tories again, is it? But the Lib Dems could use a second Brexit referendum as their bargaining chip with Sir Keir Starmer's party. Joining me now to give his thoughts is the former spokesman to the chair of the Labour Party, it's James Matthewson. Look, James, thank you very, very much. Is this the kind of news that Labour will be hoping doesn't get out there? Because I can't help but wonder whether or not those working-class voters in the red wall seats who have supposedly just gone back to the Labour Party would go back to the Tories again if they thought if they vote Labour we're going to have Brexit Mark 2.
Yeah, absolutely, Patrick, and thanks for having us on. It's one of these things, I think you're absolutely right. The Labour Party does not want to be talking about this at the moment. It's absolutely nobody's interest in the Labour Party to have this discussion at this stage. I think we saw Wes Streeton previously on broadcast, just after the local elections there, trying to veer away from these questions. Keir Starmer himself obviously isn't going to kind of bring any comment to the table at this stage. But the Lib Dems, it's in their interest to start talking about this and to signify exactly what they're willing to go to do and to go into. And obviously, crucially, previously, the Lib Dems had said that under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, they wouldn't be willing to go into a coalition. So it is a change in the Lib Dems front. But you're absolutely right when it comes to the second referendum conversation, especially those of us in the Labour Party are rightly concerned.
But would Labour what would Labour do to get the keys to Downing Street? Because if they do need the Lib Dems to get them over the line, which they may well end up doing because they do have a sizable majority to overturn, if they do and the Lib Dems say red line, second referendum, does Keir Starmer do it?
In my mind, that would be the Lib Dems' starting point, and I think it would be madness of any Labour leader, anybody in Labour Party leadership, to suggest that that would be something that would move on. I don't think it would be. I think it would be something that would come back to haunt the party for decades and decades and decades. And everyone is very, very careful about coalition conversation, especially the Lib Dems, because of what happened with their previous coalition. You hear Holly Mackenzie, who was the former chief of staff, talking to for Nick Clegg, talking about that period of time, and it was a very, very difficult period for the party, and they haven't forgotten it. So I think they would be they could start with a position like that, this is our red line. The Labour Party wouldn't tolerate it in my imagination. I couldn't imagine any Labour leader tolerating that.
No, I just don't think the public would as well, to be fair. I mean, even those people who voted for Brexit and aren't happy with the result of it, I don't think want to revisit the situation necessarily. And, well, I'm not speaking for everyone here, of course, but revisit the situation and then go back in. And it just seems like a massive hoo-ha that I'm not convinced that the nation needs. But the other big Labour Party story around for me today is they appear to have, at the local level, won back some of those working-class red wall people. Stoke-on-Trent is the obvious area that springs to mind here. I could name others. Why is that?
Well, it's quite simple. There's been a clear change and shift in the leadership and in the responsibilities of the Labour Party. There were those of us who, and I count myself amongst these, I worked for the party under Jeremy. I think Jeremy Corbyn's a wonderful guy. But during that period of leadership, there's many of us who've spoken out since that the mistakes that were made were many. and were catastrophic and resulted in 2017, which was a loss. We talk about it as if it was some kind of victory still. 2017 was a loss, and 2019 was an even worse loss. So, we need to remember that there needed to be this change. There needed to be a separation, and we needed to tell those communities that we took them seriously. And then the combination of that and the Brexit conversation finally being tied up and put to bed, I think has resulted in people saying, okay, yeah, I'm coming back to my natural home, which is the Labour Party. And it was a few significant factors, Jeremy Corbyn's leadership and Brexit, that meant that I lended my vote to the Tories.
All right, James, thank you very much. James Matthewson there, who is the former spokesman to the chair of the Labour Party. 2 Labour Party stories in town there, OK? So have the working class gone back to them? And also, as well, will a Labour-Lib Dem coalition be on the cards? And if it is, the rumours are that might mean a second Brexit referendum. How would you feel about that? But earlier on, I was giving a shout-out to, if you class yourself as working class, and I know the jury's out on what that really means these days, doesn't it? Some people are emailing in to say that's anyone with a job, and I do understand that. If you are working class and you voted Tory at the last election, where are you now? This is... no name on this. Oh, no, it is. It's from Steve, and it's a good one. He says, I'm working class, and I suppose I should be a Labour voter. I've done it in the past, but the last 2 leaders of the party aren't electable. He says, no need to rant about Corbyn, that's been done. He says he can't vote for a man that can't look a woman in the eye and answer a simple question. And that is something that's coming up a lot in my inbox now, which is that people might not necessarily like Rishi Sunak. They feel exasperated by the Conservative Party for not maybe hitting a lot of their top priorities and promises, but they just can't bring themselves to vote for Keir Starmer on this issue, that he appears to be unable to say what a woman is. All that he can do is highlight the problems in the Tory party, and the media does that for him. That's not leadership, so where's the policy? He also agrees that the windfall tax and abolition of non-dom status is doing a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to Labour Party's finances. So that's his view on that. Where do you stand on it? That's what I want to know. Also, a load of people getting in touch about a load of things about Saturday's arrest as well, which was a big topic for us that I was talking about earlier on, about whether or not the police were too heavy-handed to go in and preemptively swoop in. They say it's intelligence-led, the police. They say we had good intelligence that in order to stop a massive public disturbance, we lifted 60-odd people who were Republicans or Just Stop Oil or Extinction Rebellion or whatever. The counter-argument to that is, were they too heavy-handed and too quick? Mike says, I am pleased that the police took a no-tolerance attitude to protesters on Coronation Day. I just wish that they would take the same action to people who break the law when protesting every single day of the week. The protesters have set the tone by their previous actions. Yeah, fine. A few other emails coming in, though, just wondering why the police were able to swoop in quickly there and not as quickly at previous Just Stop Oil demonstrations or Extinction Rebellion demonstrations. And the answer to that, really, is that the Public Order Act has been updated, which gives police more powers when it comes to people who they suspect are in possession of things like bike locks, chains, super glue, etc. And also, as well, the use of facial recognition technology was absolutely rife at the coronation and in the crowd. So it's important to say those are a couple of reasons why the police were able to act more quickly. You are with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. Now, have Rishi Sunak's Conservatives lost that red wall working class vote for good? I will be discussing that next. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Protect the armed forces. Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Yes, OK, so Bridgerton star Joe Ando called the famous Buckingham Palace balcony, quotes, terribly white during King Charles's coronation. This was during ITV's coverage. A great email here from Andrea. It says, asking if the British royal family is too white is as daft as asking if the Italian mafia is too Italian. But there we go. Let's have a listen to what this actress said.
There is a bit of me that we've gone from the rich diversity of the Abbey to a terribly white balcony. I'm very struck by
Yes.
that. I'm also looking at those younger generations and thinking, what are the nuances that they will inhabit as they grow? Nuances that Charles has exhibited from a teenage into early 20s young man.
Yeah, I wanted to play that for you in case you've not seen it yet, because I've got a big debate on that very topic. Is the royal family too white? OK, which, again, is something I never thought I would have to say. But there we go. We've been led that way. So get your views coming in on that. I'll read them out and we'll have a debate on it in the next hour. But after the weekend's coronation celebrations, ministers are finally coming to terms with the Conservative Party's brutal pummelling in the local elections on Thursday. So the Tories lost more than 1,000 council seats, and pollsters now suggest that a hung parliament could be on the cards at the next general election. But, have Labour snatched back the working class vote from Conservatives? A little bit earlier on, I spoke to Conservative Deputy Chairman Lee Anderson, who says that the local elections don't pose a wholly negative picture of his party in relation to the working class. Play the clip.
You know, it's not this picture that we're seeing. Yes, it's an awful sight on Friday, seeing over 1,000 councillors losing their jobs, obviously. But in some of the red wall areas like mine, we've actually made gains. So that encourages me. And I've always said, Patrick, that a lot of the red wall voters are working class voters, if you like, voted Conservative for the first time in 2019. Three reasons, really: Boris, Brexit and Jeremy Corbyn. They're looking for an excuse to vote for us again. And if we get things right over the next year or so, then they will vote for us again. So I'm quietly confident that in areas like mine we'll retain these seats. I think people are fed up, not just with the main political parties, they're fed up full stop. I mean, look at the turnout at the local elections last week in some parts of Ashfield, just 20-odd%. You know, I think you're lucky anywhere in the country to find over 30%. So 70% of the actual electorate are not going out to vote. So they're a little bit fed up. And you're quite right about the small votes. It seems to be taking an age. I am encouraged by Rishi because for the first time since I've been an MP, Rishi and Suella have given us something that no previous leadership gave us. And that was, if you arrive here illegally, you will not be able to claim asylum.
OK, Peter Obers joins me now, who is the former editor of the Labour List website. You heard what Lee Anderson had to say there, Peter. I'm going to just flip the question on its head a little bit and not have the Tories lost the working class. Ask, have Labour won the working class back?
Well, it's a work in progress. The phrase that keeps coming out of the Labour Party over the weekend is that they're confident but not complacent about the general election. And I'll tell you why. First of all, this was a local election. It wasn't across the whole of the United Kingdom. It was just in parts. And the turnout was very varied, in some cases low, as Lee Anderson said. If you bear with me for one stat, the thing about the projected national vote share, so that means had this been a general election, what would it have looked like, is only a 7% lead for Labour. That's not enough. That's why the Tories are trying to get up this story about another coalition of chaos. Labour has got to quash that immediately.
So you think Labour has to come out, and if you are just joining us, actually, it ties in what we were talking about earlier on, which is whether Labour are going to get into bed with the Lib Dems and put a second Brexit referendum on the table. Labour, in your view, needs to come out right now and say, no, not happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, we know there's this link in the red wall between poorer voters and Brexit. And I was just looking at my list of some of the areas that we did recover: Stoke, Medway in Kent and Blackpool. That's all very promising. But we've got a flavour of what the Tory attack campaign will be. And it will be a bit like the Ed Miliband one of 2015, another coalition of chaos. Keir Starmer's already ruled out a coalition with the SNP. That's right, because they want to break up the United Kingdom. You heard Ed Davey hinting at a coalition already. Absolute nonsense. I would encourage Labour, in the fullness of time, to kill off coalition talk with the Lib Dems as well.
What is the working class?
It's impossible to define these days, because it used to be the idea that people work for a living, but in fact, tens of millions of people, most of the country has to work for a living, and it's fewer than 1% that don't. Let me try and define it another way, which is the precariat, insecurity, people that might know they're one paycheck away from oblivion, or people for whom just having a deposit for a mortgage for a house is a pipe dream. There are lots of different indicators, but it's going to come back to insecurity.
And realistically, what is Labour offering those people that the Tories aren't?
Well, some of these things are a dotted line. So the cost of living crisis is about pain today, but it's also about pain tomorrow. Because it used to be, and it's an old adage, you work hard, you play by the rules, you put money aside, and that allows you, without inherited wealth, to get together a deposit for a property. And that was, according to sociologists, how you went from being a poorer person to a middle-class person. But even a deposit now is beyond the reach of some people, either because very low pay that's not kept rate of inflation, or because they're so indebted when they come out of university that the 40 grand they needed for a property deposit has already gone on tuition fees.
Do you think people fundamentally care more about stopping the boats or having more money in the pocket, actually, when they go to vote?
I think you can't put voters into one block. I think probably 80 or 90% of society feel poorer than a decade ago. Lots of reasons for that: Brexit, austerity, and so on and so on. The Labour campaign has to be the Ronald Reagan one of, are you better off or worse off than you were 4 or 5 years ago? But I don't doubt for a moment that the migrant crisis and small boats are going to be a big part of the Tory election campaign. It's not because they're going to solve it. All they've pledged to do is pass a law in Parliament not to actually solve it. But they perceive, a bit like the Rwanda flights, which have never, ever happened, that simply talking about it puts Labour onto uncomfortable territory.
All right, look, Peter, thank you very, very much. Really good, that. Peter Edwards there, who is the former editor of the Labour List website. Now, we've just found out here, I thought I'd give us a bit of light relief at the end, that one lucky person here in the UK has won, get this, more than £46 million in the Euro Millions. And that's only a third of the prize money. So the same amount has been won by someone in Switzerland and also in France. Can you imagine winning £46 million? I'm very honest about this, would be dead in a week if that happened to me. But there we go. It got me thinking, though, what would you do if you won the lottery? So I went out and about a little bit earlier on and spoke to a few people just to find out, what would you do if you won the lottery?
I think we'd buy a really nice place to live.
Buy a massive house?
Yeah.
OK, fair enough. What, any other little expenses that you'd go for, any luxuries? Because you've been very responsible there. If it's just you and me talking, what would you like to do with the money?
To be honest, I just want to take care of these guys. I'd like to get them a nice house, have everything nice and settled. We don't have to worry about anything. Just take care of everything we need.
I seriously don't know, because the chances are pretty slim.
Someone's just won 40 million, that's why I'm asking. What would you do with 40 million quid?
Honestly?
Yeah.
I think mostly charity.
Oh, that's really sweet. Any charities in particular?
No, I would have to give it some considered thought.
Thank you. Oh, not all?
No, not all.
No.
I would, yeah, a lot of it would go to charity.
You were coming across like an absolute angel then for a second.
No, you'd have to see your own family first, and friends probably, but The majority would go to charity.
Give it to my kids.
All of it?
All of it.
So some guys just won 40 million. You're going to give 40 million to your kids?
I've got 5 kids.
Fair enough.
Not going to go like far, is it?
You've got to spend a little bit to yourself, surely.
I can survive. I'll give it all to them.
Oh.
Stop.
I'll buy a nice beach house, I
Yeah,
think.
that'd be lovely. A little, like, villa in Italy or something like that.
Yeah,
would be nice.
Amalfi Coast.
Yeah.
You've still got a lot left over here, ladies. So what? Well,
Invest some and give some to charity.
Invest some. Yeah. Yeah, no, maybe I'd give some to charity as well, actually. Yeah.
is if we're being honest, is the real answer have a series of absolutely massive parties and spend a lot on that?
No, it would be parties, it'd be holidays, travel, and parties.
£40 million worth of parties. Yeah, fair.
I'd probably give a few close friends, like 100,000 or something. Yeah.
Would you? Oh, this is the thing. Would you give her a couple of million quid if you won?
Yeah. Well, I have to say that. Yeah.
She wouldn't, would she? We all know she wouldn't. And also, bless her, the lady who said she'd give it all to charity, liar. Liar pants on fire. Massive yacht, private island, series of absolutely epic parties. I'm just still, for what it's worth, actually joined by Peter Edwards. Why not rope him back in and go, what would you do if you won the lottery?
I would probably buy a slightly bigger home and then give a huge amount away to the Simon Community Homeless Charity that I used to work with. And I don't know what I'd do after that.
40 million. Come on, you've got to do something. Why is everyone so responsible with their money? Maybe this says more about me than it does everybody else. Maybe I'm learning something about me here now. But realistically, the 40-odd million quid, I mean, you could do anything with that. Go to space.
Well, I thought that was interesting because maybe it shows in our lifetime people's values are changing a bit because we are, as your previous item showed, we are all a bit worried and we're battening down the hatches.
Yeah.
It wasn't in those answers go on a mega cruise and buy a Rolls Royce and then pay a man or woman to drive me around all day. It was buy a home for my parents, buy a home for my children, buy one home for myself or give it away to charity. And it's interesting, there's a parallel. I know you're a football fan. Footballers always buy a house for their mum when they make it.
They always buy a house for them. And Peter, thank you very much, mate. Cheers, Peter Edwards, the former editor of Labour List. What would you do if you won the lottery? Get your emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Right, you are watching and listening to Patrick Christys right here on GB News. Plenty more to come in the final hour of this show, including a big debate. Yes, we're returning to this. Is the royal family too white? Don't miss it. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Evening all, it's just gone 5 o'clock. Patrick Christys here on GB News. I'm with you for the next hour, so let's make it a good one. Here's what we've got at the top. We're going to be talking about whether or not our royal family is too white. One actress thinks that the balcony was terrifyingly white. We're having a big debate on that. What are your views? I want you to get in touch on it. In other news, we're also going to be talking about whether or not the police were too heavy-handed at the coronation and what it means going forward. If there's any protests they think will cause disruption, does that mean those people get lifted? Is that a good thing in your view, though, given the way that Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion, of course, behave, or banned for free speech? Very much two sides to that one. Good news, though, for patients. Yes, that's right. Apparently now, when you actually ring a doctor's surgery, you might be able, under a new system that the government is pumping a load of money into, actually get a call back and get an appointment, opposed to the way that it is at the minute, which is like trying to break out of Alcatraz, isn't it? So good news for the NHS backlog. And to wrap us off, yes, get a load of this, OK? They are now saying that driving with less than 5 hours sleep is as bad as driving while drunk. I refuse to believe that. If I drive on 3 hours sleep, there's no way that I'm as bad a driver as I would be after 3 large glasses of wine. But now supposedly you're going to get a blood test, and if you fail it, you get banned from driving. This is just a particular scheme that is being rolled out now. Madness, if you ask me. Anyway, all of this coming your way and much more in the next hour. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Get the emails coming in thick and fast. 2 big ones today for you. Do you think the police were too heavy-handed with those protesters? And is our royal family too white? Emails coming in, please, people. Now, though, headlines with Polly.
Thanks very much indeed, Patrick. And the latest top stories at 5 o'clock. Well, we can tell you, of course, the big help out has been happening this weekend, and the Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children have joined millions of volunteers for the final day of coronation celebrations. The King's grandchildren have been renovating a scout hut in Berkshire, and after a day of painting and digging, they toasted marshmallows and tried their hands at archery. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, if you're watching on television, you can see there, has been meeting elderly residents and preparing food at a village hall in Hertfordshire, and he's been praising the weekend's celebrations.
And it's community spirit like this that binds our country together. It's fantastic to be a part of it here today and help out myself. Now, on the weekend, I think no other country in the world could put on such a dazzling spectacle. And it was a proud expression of our history, our culture, our traditions, but also a reflection of the modern character of our country. It was deeply moving to be in the coronation service and incredibly uplifting. And it's an experience, I think, that nobody will forget for the rest of their lives.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has backed the Metropolitan Police as it faced criticism over arrests made during the King's coronation. 64 people were arrested, including those from the anti-monarchy group Republic and environmental activist group Just Stop Oil. Rishi Sunak says officers acted based on what they think is best, but Graham Smith, the CEO of Republic, called it a direct attack on democracy. The Met Police now faces questions from the Police and Crime Committee. The government plans to give £240 million to GP practices this year to improve basic services. The money will be used to end the so-called 8 a.m. scramble to get an appointment and to introduce an online booking system. Receptionists will also have additional roles to speed up the booking process. But the Shadow Health Minister, Andrew Gwynn, told GB News more still needs to be done.
there's nothing in it that will train more doctors, that will enable patients to use a face-to-face appointment, or that will bring back the family GP. It's a very shallow offer, tinkering around at the edges. What we really ought to have had was the government's workforce strategy, something we've been calling for on the Labour benches for some time, that sets out how we are going to get the extra doctors, the extra staff in the NHS that we need to be able to transform the NHS into the service we want it to be.
Looking at news overseas now, and Ukraine has accused Russia of firing Iranian-made drones at multiple cities, including 30 at the capital, Kyiv. Officials also claim Russia plans to take control of the key city of Bakhmut by tomorrow, which is their Victory Day holiday. Meanwhile, President Zelensky will meet with the President of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, tomorrow to discuss a new support package. The former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko says the Russian aggression must stop.
We have destroyed civilian object, and this is just very easy to understand. Putin does not stop shelling Ukraine, and the only way how we can stop Putin is our joint victory, like we do in the Second World War. Today there was an anti-Hitler coalition. Today we create the anti-Putin coalition.
Here, a man has been arrested and remanded in custody, charged with the attempted murder of an attack on a 71-year-old woman in Worcester. 56-year-old Anthony Roberts was also charged with sexual assault and possession of a bladed weapon in a public place. The woman was attacked near the River Severn last night. She remains in a critical condition in hospital. Roberts will appear in court next month. The First Minister of Scotland has been accused of negligence for delaying a mental health pledge. The proposal aimed to recruit an additional 1,000 mental health workers and provide every GP practice with access to a wellbeing service by 2026. But it's been put on hold due to the so-called difficult decisions in November's emergency budget review. The Scottish Labour Party says mental health is low on the government's priority list, but the government says it is committed to improving services. And finally, a bill calling for companies to follow a code of practice while removing unsafe cladding is due to be tabled in Parliament. Residents in a tower block in Ipswich claim they were deprived of fresh air and natural light when a construction company removing the dangerous cladding from their building wrapped it in shrink wrap without informing them. Conservative MP Tom Hunt is introducing the Cladding Remediation Works Bill, calling for better communication with residents and a clear timescale. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Now, back to Patrick.
Right, OK, so we're going in right at the very top of the show with something that has been a massive talking point in the inbox and for a lot of people. Bridgerton star Joa Ando called the famous Buckingham Palace balcony, quote, terribly white during King Charles's coronation. This was during ITV's coverage, OK? I believe we can have a little look and a listen to this now, and then we'll have a chat about it.
There is a bit of me that we've gone from the rich diversity of the Abbey to a terribly white balcony. I'm very struck by that. I'm also looking at those younger generations and thinking, what are the nuances that they will inhabit as they grow? Nuances that Charles has exhibited from a teenage into early 20s young man.
Fascinating, isn't it? Because that coronation ceremony and indeed the coronation concert that took place last night were two of the most diverse events that one could possibly imagine. At the actual coronation itself, we had a Hindu in the shape of Rishi Sunak doing a reading. There was a black lady bishop, a black choir, a Greek Orthodox priest, a rabbi. I mean, take your pick. Basically, it was one of the more diverse events that the coronation could ever imagine. Also, the fact is, we do live in an 85% demographically white country. What's the problem with our royal family just being white? Michael Cole is the royal correspondent, and he joins me now this afternoon. Michael, how do you feel about whether or not the royal family is too white?
Well, let's look at the facts. The royal family are descended from German royalty, the House of Hanover. The family name was Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. until 1917, when King George V sensibly changed it to the House of Windsor. But not knowing you were going to be on this subject, I made a couple of notes. I don't usually use notes, but let me just tell you to counteract what was said on that commentary. Princess Diana, the late, much missed by me and everybody else, Princess Diana, she definitely had Indian antecedents through the Spencer family. Lord Frederick Windsor, who is the son of Prince and Princess Michael of Kent, he's married to an absolutely charming and beautiful Jewish actress called Sophie. Meghan Markle is mixed race. I believe she's still part of the royal family. I haven't heard any.
She refused to come, though, didn't she?
I haven't heard anything from. Well, I don't think she's actually left. I think she rather likes being a princess. Yeah. Does she not? Lord Snowdon. He had Jewish ancestry through his mother. The family of Kate Middleton, the Princess of Wales, she had some very interesting characters in her family background. And Princess Michael of Kent is from the Czech Republic. Now, what do you do about that? It seems to be a very unfair charge when you can't help being who you are to have that more or less as an allegation against you, a charge to your discredit.
Well, 100%.
Isn't it really how the people act and what they do for the country? As we always say, it's not about the colour of the skin. It's not about. It's what you can contribute and what you are as a human being.
But I mean, would she have said the same thing, or just with a slightly different colour involved, if we were talking about a similar ceremony but in parts of Africa or the Middle East? Well, no, of course not. And this is what the implication for me there was, that there was something wrong about people on that balcony being white. But Michael, can I just talk a little bit more about the Christian undertones to the ceremony? Now, I was on Twitter, which is always a horrible place to be at times like this, because you do see a lot of hate there. And people were talking about how ridiculous this ceremony was. Oh, isn't it absolutely stupid? And I thought, I don't go to a mosque or to a synagogue or to a Hindu temple or to a gurdwara or anything like that and observe a ceremony there and then pass comment about how ridiculous I think it is. Because I think that would probably be a bit racist. And there was a lot of that going about, and it's not a bit offensive.
I thought it was terrific in that way, and that was facilitated by Her Majesty the Queen, the late Queen, who was Supreme Governor of the Church of England. And she said as late as 2018 that it was the purpose of the Anglican Church, and this is an Anglican ceremony, to include and make safe in this country for everybody of every major religion to freely practice their beliefs. And that is one of the glories of this country: freedom of speech, freedom of peaceful assembly, freedom of thought, and freedom to practice your religion. And you're seeing it right there. Now, how can anybody, I think you'd have to be extremely unkind and small-minded to criticize, because what could be done more to be more inclusive? And another thing, Patrick, most of us were nominally Christian. Most of us are not as observant as maybe we once were. But going back 550 years, Patrick, has Protestantism been good for this country? And there's a strong argument that it has been.
No, absolutely. Michael, I'm going to be returning to this debate a bit later on about what that lady said about the balcony being too wide. So I'd just like to chat to you about something else quickly, if that's all right, which is Prince Harry jetting in and jetting out, around 28 hours in the country, racking up over the course of his 2 flights to Los Angeles and back, believed to have racked up around 15 tonnes of CO2. So for a privacy-hungry eco-warrior, one can imagine this was a nightmare for the guy. But King Charles supposedly doing some quite sad toast, really, to Archie wherever he may be. I found that quite sad. Is Harry depriving his kids of something really special here?
Sad, you're right. You see, blood is thicker than water. Harry's his second son. He doesn't see the child, Prince Archie. He doesn't see Lilibet. Of course he's going to regret that. You know, why they can't, well, it's going to be very, very difficult to mend fences at the moment. I mean, so many terrible and cruel and hard things were said in that book, Spare, Ghost, written by an American journalist, that it's going to be very difficult reconciling, particularly with his brother, because what men do not like, they can take criticism of themselves, but when there's criticism of their wives, they don't like it. And I don't think the king liked criticism of Camilla, and I'm sure William didn't like criticism of Kate, because they were very unfair criticisms. And so I would like to see some reconciliation. There's nothing worse than seeing brothers fighting, and that's not just in the royal family, that's anywhere. This is all too much Coronation Street rather than Coronation. So it's regrettable. If they would listen to me, I would give them advice, and I would work out a way of bringing them back together. But quite frankly, at the moment, Patrick, and you and I would do our best because we're men of goodwill, there's no chance of them coming back together.
Michael, thank you, as ever. Michael Cole there, royal reporter, who did a stellar job for us during the coronation. Now, another coronation controversy was about the arrests that took place, and there were lots of them. By the latest count, and presumably this hasn't gone up since I came on air, 64 protesters were arrested over the weekend. Westminster Council has now joined the Mayor of London and the capital's policing committee in questioning the Met Police's approach under the new Public Order Act. I can see both sides to this. People wanting people lifted and no drama at the coronation, and I can get all of that. I do also have very big concerns about freedom of speech, and just because I wouldn't be out there personally protesting for the abolition of the monarchy or Just Stop Oil or anything, there may well come a time in my life when I feel adamant about something, so adamant about it that I want to take to the streets and protest about it. And under these new public order acts, or the updated version of it, would that see me put in a prison cell for 24 hours, or that is maybe something that people think should happen anyway? I'm joined now by Chris Daw, KC, barrister and author, Justice on Trial. Chris, thank you very, very much. Right, have the police overstepped their mark? Could they be sued for this?
Yeah, they can and they will be sued, I'm afraid. This legislation, as you probably know, came into force just 4 days before the coronation. The police had no time to plan for it, no time to consider the balance between public safety, which really is what all of these police actions should be about, rather than preventing protest, and they had no time to balance all of that with the right of freedom of speech that you've just described. It's incredibly worrying. I don't know if people are aware, but this new legislation means that you can be sent to prison for up to 10 years for causing a public nuisance. Now, that includes, for example, blocking the highway, etc., or impeding rights of way or access of other people. Now, in blocking the highway and impeding access, I would have thought was one of the most common and indeed one of the most historically relevant form of public protest. And now you could go to prison in this country, in this supposedly free country, for up to 10 years. And this was the power the police were using just 4 days after it came into force to arrest people for handing out rape alarms in Soho.
Well, what the police are saying, and no doubt will continue to say, is that they were leading on intelligence and acting on intelligence. And we are yet to see that intelligence, Chris. So, with respect, do you need to be a little bit wary of how strongly you're going against the police? Because they could drop a load of dossiers here, a load of WhatsApp messages from people saying, look, we knew this was going to happen. And then, with respect, you might look a bit silly.
Well, I'm perfectly willing to take the risk. When Westminster's rape awareness campaigners and representatives are on.
Well, we've lost Chris there. We've managed to bring up Lawrence Gerlis. I'm hoping that we can go back to Chris Daw. In case you're wondering who that chap was, he's Lawrence Gerlis, and very shortly he's going to be joining me for a chat about whether or not the new GP phone system is going to work. Chris is back. We replaced you there with a doctor for a second, Chris. Chris, carry on. So you were saying that you basically don't think the police were acting on intelligence. Is that right?
I don't know what the police were acting or not acting on. All I know is that if you arrest people for handing out rape alarms when they are in Soho and it's late at night and there is the risk to the public, and we know that police officers have been responsible for countless rapes and indeed murders in recent years, it's hardly a good look for the Metropolitan Police to be clamping down on women's safety campaigners.
Is there not a precedent that was set largely by football hooligans? So back in the day, when football hooliganism was a lot more prevalent, the police would have a good idea of who was travelling where to what games, and they could act preemptively. Is that not something similar that's happened here?
Well, listen, as I say, and you rightly pointed out, we don't have access to the police's intelligence. But what I can say from what I've seen and the number of arrests that I've seen in connection with this, and in the police's own explanation, just doesn't hold water. They're concerned that someone might have used a rape alarm to disrupt the coronation. So what? So what if they used a rape alarm to disrupt the coronation? They're entitled to. It's not a coronation that's somehow sacrosanct in law and protected from privilege. It's a matter of choice to have a coronation at vast public expense. And those who wish to make clear that they disagree with it and are against it were entitled to make their point by whatever means they needed, so long as they didn't affect public safety and they didn't.
Do you think that if you take the view that you do, which I can completely understand, which is that if this is just a precedent for every single time something similar to this goes forward, then it is very worrying. But do you think in isolation, though, Chris, a lot of members of the public will look at this and go, I'm very glad that the coronation wasn't disrupted. I don't particularly like the uncooperative Christys who've been causing a lot of trouble on our streets for however long. And I am quite glad that the police just cracked down. So we are now having this conversation as opposed to a conversation about someone lobbing themselves in front of the King's carriage. And can you understand the public attitude towards that?
I can understand the public attitude, and I understand that a significant proportion of the population, probably a majority of older people, but a minority of younger people, are really interested in this event and think it's very important. But equally, just because a majority of the public, whatever it is, think that something should be protected from protest, doesn't mean that it should, because the right to protest isn't about majority opinion, it's about minority opinion and the rights of minorities to protest against things they fundamentally and strongly disagree with, like the suffragettes. And nowadays, you can be sent to prison for up to 6 months for chaining yourself to a railing. What would have happened to the women's right to vote if that was the case 100 years ago?
Yeah, I do get that. And I think maybe the counter to it would be the amount of money, potentially, that some of the Just Stop Oil protesters or Extinction Rebellion have been costing us by locking down a capital city. Maybe there's a financial element to that. Because that actually, in isolation, if I said to you, just in total isolation, I'm going to go into that building now and I'm going to take 30 million quid out of it, that's a massive crime, isn't it? In a way, they're kind of doing that by gluing themselves to stuff in the middle of London, aren't they?
No, well, I disagree completely, and you're taking it entirely out of context the fact that we are, as a species, completely destroying our planet and poisoning the lungs of young children in London who are having to suck in diesel day in, day out on their way to school. If it takes a bit of a shaking up of society to make some of these points and to stop us damaging and destroying our planet and the health of young people,
are you advocating there as about
this is worth it.
Yeah. But then this is where I think there's a slight discrepancy, though, Chris, isn't it? Because we're talking about the rule of law being a bit too heavily handed, or actually not really properly applied by the police force there. But then you also appear to be advocating a breaking of the law in some circumstances.
No, I'm not advocating a breaking of the law. I'm saying it should be a fundamental right to use reasonable means, lying down in front of traffic, for example. It's not a violent act. It's a disruptive act. Okay. It's irritating. It's inconvenient. But I think it should be protected as a right by law, because protests we see it time and again. Look what happens whenever we see coverage of events in Russia or other countries where public protest is squashed by the police. What's the difference now between the protesters in Russia against the war in St. Petersburg and the protesters here in London? What's the difference? They're being cracked down on.
You would presumably take exactly the same response if it was anti-lockdown protests, would you?
Of course I would, absolutely. I think protest is absolutely to be permitted. And in fact, I was against lockdown as well, but that doesn't mean that I would necessarily choose to protest, but others can choose to protest, and they should do.
Chris, thank you. Always good. Chris Doyle there, KC, barrister and author of Justice on Trial. Right now, the government has announced plans to end what it calls the 8 a.m. scramble for GP appointments, as it promises 240 million quid of funding to overhaul primary care. The proposals include the introduction of new online booking tools and the training of 6,500 receptionists. Joining me now is Dr. Lawrence Gurles, who is indeed a medical professional. Now, we got a little sneak peek at Dr. Lawrence earlier on, which is just as well you weren't doing anything embarrassing, actually. So now, as it currently happens, people say that you should put a GP's receptionist in charge of the channel because they wouldn't let any small boats through. But is this going to change it? Is this going to change the situation for people now, patients who are desperately trying to get an appointment? Is this going to make the system better for them? More phone systems, callback options?
Well, I think it's a move in the right direction. It's about 20 years too late. I remember when Tony Blair was campaigning for his second term, that a member of the audience raised this whole point, and he was totally shocked, had no idea this went on, that you had to get on the phone at 8 a.m. and stand there getting an engaged tone for about an hour and a half in the hopes that you might get through. Now, look, having a digital phone system, a cloud-based phone system, all that will mean is you'll just know what number you are in the queue. It's not going to give you more GPs. It's not going to give you more receptionists. But look, it's a move in the right direction. At least it's an acknowledgement that there is an issue here. Having said that, the overall problem is that there's far too much demand and not enough GPs. And I don't think this does anything to address either of those. And both of them need to be addressed. We need to address demand. It's no good saying let's train more doctors. We need to address demand, some of it inappropriate, and the expectations of patients.
Yes, but this centres now, I believe, around retraining 6,500 receptionists, which means that the individual who originally just got a job as a receptionist at a GP surgery is potentially going to have to be making life and death decisions, are they not? Because someone rings up and they're going to have to say you either ring 111, you go to your pharmacy, you come in, or you ring 999. Do they sign up for that?
Look, they should be doing that anyway. Our receptionists do that. You've got to. It's not that difficult. You have simple protocols. Having said that, laughably, I've seen some woman on social media saying, well, I don't want to explain to a receptionist what's going on. Well, for heaven's sake, this is the new world. You can't expect to sit down in front of a doctor without the doctor having any idea what the reason for that consultation is. It's basic stuff. Of course, receptionists should be able to do that. They know the difference between I want a repeat prescription and I've got crushing chest pain. I mean, it's not rocket science. And of course, receptionists can do that, should do that. We've got to triage patients. Patrick, I've seen a patient recently who had the unfortunate symptoms of cancer 2 weeks before Christmas. He couldn't get an appointment with his GP because, if you remember, 2 weeks before Christmas, we were overloaded with strep A, coughs and colds, and all of those people were blocking him, this poor man, getting a GP appointment. In the end, he had to pay me to see a private doctor to diagnose his cancer and then try and get him back into the system. And all in all, you know, he's had a delay of his diagnosis. If we can't triage properly and put people like that ahead of the coughs and colds, then the system is failing. We've got to do this properly.
All right, look, Dr Lawrence, thank you very, very much. Sorry it was short and sweet. It was Dr Lawrence Gurlis there who's just reacting to the government's new plan to hopefully make it easier for you to get a GP's appointment. So instead of ringing up at 8 o'clock in the morning, spending an hour on hold and being told that you're 50th in the queue or not getting a call back at all, now, supposedly, you will get a call back as quickly as possible and you will be able to get an appointment. But I will believe it when I see it. You're watching Patrick Christys right here on GB News. Do not go anywhere because I have got some lively debate for you when we come back. Britain's News Channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, right, so have the Conservative Party lost the working class? There's been a big theme of this show today, and I want to know what you think, but I also crucially want to know what our very own Darren Grimes thinks, GB News presenter of Saturday 5. Cheeky little plug there. Darren, have the Conservative Party lost the working class?
I mean, look, Patrick, it's completely undeniable that in Brexit-backing areas of, you know, the likes of Dover, Blackpool, Medway, Airwash and Stoke, you've seen Labour do quite well. Undeniable. It has done well, and that's in the backdrop, of course, Patrick, of their worst general election results since the 1930s. So it's no small feat. They should be proud as punch. But let's not forget, Patrick, that a general election is a totally different beast, right? When you're talking not about potholes and public services, but you're talking instead about who's in number 10. And fundamentally, I don't reckon voters up here and in other parts of the country, the so-called Red Wall, like Slippery Starmer KC, right? He spent years telling with Patrick that Boris Johnson was a liar. Well, I tell you what, Sir Keir Starmer is lucky that his nose doesn't grow each time he lies, or he'd be in the Guinness World Book of Records by now. So whilst it's undeniable, as I say, that Sunak has done bad. He's no longer Dishi Rishi and he's more snookered Sunak. I don't deny that for a second. But I've got a list here, Patrick, of pledges that Sir Keir Starmer's made, right? And rolled back on. He told her that as a matter of principle, goes into what you've just been talking to Dr. Gurlis about earlier. He told us that as a principle, you shouldn't make money from ill health. Now he reckons that private involvement in the NHS is a good thing. He said he would scrap university tuition fees. That's popular with the Corbynistas of the world. Of course, now he's saying, no, we can't do that. It would be insanely expensive. He said he fought against HS2. Now he says the Labour Party's all for it, always has been. And he said he would bring in the same self-ID trans radicalism as Nicola Sturgeon did in Scotland. Let's remind viewers, that would have brought in a double rapist in a female prison. It did bring in a double rapist into a female prison. Now he says he wouldn't bring in those pledges. And of course, then the ultimate thing for me, Brexit, right? He said that actually he would be the architect of Labour's second referendum campaign. And now the Lib Dems are apparently saying that as support for the Labour Party in any hung parliament, they would make it a prerequisite, Patrick, that we reopen the Brexit talks. So while Sunak isn't great, you cannot trust a single word that comes out of Slippery Starmer's mouth, right? He is a total liar, and I know that's a strong word, but he is, and I don't think voters up here will trust the bloke as far as they can throw him.
Darren, I mean, it's incredibly strong stuff, and thank you very, very much. I know you've been waiting around for a little while there, but my interview at the top of the show ran way over, so I appreciate it. We're going to have to throw it to the news. But Darren Grimes, and make sure you tune in to the Saturday 5 every single Saturday, 8 till 9 p.m, right here on GB News for a bit more of that. Keir Starmer would no doubt deny that he is a liar. One thing I will just say very quickly is that Ian Duncan-Smith has written today saying unless the Conservatives actually sort out the small boats crisis and stop taxing businesses to high heaven, they will not win the next general election, and that is a big issue for the working class, which is why I was asking whether or not they've lost the working class. Anyway, quite enough from me for the time being. Polly Middlehurst is here right now with your news.
Patrick, thank you. Headlines at past. The Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children have joined millions of volunteers today for the final day of coronation celebrations. The King's grandchildren were renovating a scout hut in Berkshire for the big help out today, and after a full day of activities, they tried their hand at archery as well. The Prime Minister, who's been preparing food at a village hall in Hertfordshire, has praised the weekend's celebrations and efforts, as well as taking time to talk to the elderly.
And it's community spirit like this that binds our country together. It's fantastic to be a part of it here today and help out myself. Now, on the weekend, I think no other country in the world could put on such a dazzling spectacle. And it was a proud expression of our history, our culture, our traditions, but also a reflection of the modern character of our country. It was deeply moving to be in the coronation service and incredibly uplifting. And it's an experience, I think, that nobody will forget for the rest of their lives.
The government plans to give £240 million to GP practices this year to improve basic services. The money will be used to end the so-called 8 a.m. scramble to get an appointment and to introduce an online booking system. Receptionists will also have additional roles to speed up the booking process. Ukraine has accused Russia of firing Iranian-made drones at multiple cities, including over 30 at the capital, Kyiv. Officials also claim Russia plans to take control of the key city of Bakhmut by tomorrow, which is their victory day. Meanwhile, President Zelensky will meet with the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, tomorrow. They'll be discussing a new support package. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
And time for a quick snapshot now of today's markets. The pound buying you $1.2632 and €1.1462. The price of gold is £1,605.69 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed the day at 7,778 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
OK, so it's time to return now to what's been a big topic throughout the course of the show today. And that is, believe it or not, whether or not our royal family is actually too white. And the reason why I was talking about this was because Bridgerton star Joa Ando had called the momentous balcony scene terribly white. She was on ITV's coverage and she said that the appearance contrasted starkly with the Westminster Abbey ceremony, which showed rich diversity. Let's play the clip and then we're going to have a debate about this.
It was, there is a bit of me that we've gone from the rich diversity of the Abbey to a terribly white balcony. I'm very struck by
Yes.
that. I'm also looking at those younger generations and thinking, what are the nuances that they will inhabit as they grow? Nuances that Charles has exhibited from a teenage into early 20s young man.
What on earth does she mean? We are about 85% white in this country. There are royal family, and I do believe that there was a mixed-race member of that royal family who was invited but decided not to come. Would she be saying the same thing about African dignitaries or Middle Eastern dignitaries? And the implication there, maybe I'm wrong, what I took from it was there's something wrong about the royal family, the people on that balcony being white. I'm joined now by David Oldroyd-Bolt, who's a historian and political commentator, and John McTernan, who's a former advisor to Tony Blair. Look, both of you, thank you very much. John, I'm going to start with you. Do you think that the royal family is too white?
Yes, it is. And I think the proof of that is the way that it rejected Meghan, who could have been a great addition to the royal family, formally as well as informally, and whose wedding to Prince Harry brought in so many different parts of diversity. You know, it had references to Dr. King. It had some great preaching. It had a whole load of diversity, and it showed the opportunity that the royal family had to expand a bit and to reflect back to our nation, which is full of mixed race couples. I think we've got the largest proportion of mixed race marriages and partnerships of any country in Europe, and to have that reflected in the royal family would have been a great thing. But she was pushed out.
All right, David, I'll ask the same question to you. Is the royal family too white?
I don't know how you can say that any family is too much of one race or another. Are we suggesting here that the King ought to be saying to the younger generations, look here, chaps, in the interests of diversity and a skin-deep diversity, I need one of you out of the 5 of you to go and marry someone of mixed race or of a BAME, so that we reflect the nation's current statistics, and then in the next 10 years we'll change that. I'm glad that Mr McTernan mentioned Dr Martin Luther King, because about half a century ago he said, I dream that one day my children will be judged not by the colour of their skins, but by the quality of their character. And something that strikes me about the recent discussions over race in let's say, the past half-decade, have been that increasingly it is only about the colour of the skin and not at all about the content of the character. And I should like that debate to change, because it is in a totally reducible way. It is a racist debate to say that the quality of the character matters not at all, that the only way we can be judged is by whether we're white, whether we're black, whether we're Asiatic, or whether we're a mixture of those. And for someone to say that this is a terribly white thing does, as you said at the top of this segment, impute that there is something inherently wrong about being white.
Yeah, look, John, that is what I took from that. And I found that bizarre because, you know, I wouldn't have looked at a similar-ish ceremony from an African country or a Middle Eastern country. Oh, gosh, that balcony's very black. I mean, what would I mean by that? Unless that was derogatory, John. Do you think that was a derogatory comment?
We're discussing this, and you're reacting like that because there is a sense of something being violated, and that's the sense that white men have in this century, that something about their authority, something about their place in the world is threatened. When a senior actor, a black British actor, speaks like that, she spoke about a range of things. She spoke about the ways in which, as a Prince of Wales, King Charles was open to so much in his life growing up. The way that he embraced environmentalism, but also the way he wants to embrace other faiths. And I think it's that sense that when things are terribly white, it is about, are you reflecting back a return to a different type of royal family, one that's not in touch? And the royal family had a huge crisis after the death of Princess Diana. When they felt massively out of touch with the country and not reflecting our diversity, whether it's of faith, whether it is of race, I think is an issue. And I think the debate is a good issue is a good one to be having. And I think if white men feel a bit uncomfortable in their position, that's a good result too, because white men should feel a bit uncomfortable, because the patriarchy has done terrible things in this country, and more diversity of gender, and more diversity of sexuality, and more diversity of race is a great thing to be reflected in our country. It's a great thing, actually, to be reflected in the cabinet of the Tory party.
OK, just be perfectly honest with me, John, before I go back to David. Then the next time I want to book someone on for this kind of discussion, and I want someone with your views on, would you honestly be happy if, instead of going to you, who I think is perfect for this discussion, I deliberately chose a disabled black woman?
Well, as you remember, when we discussed who should be the new chair of the BBC, I said it was time for a young black woman. I'm very, very well aware that as a late middle-aged white man, I am often in place holding back much more talented, younger black women. So, yeah, if you find some talent that's better than me, book them.
This is it. Yeah, now I've got to do that, John. But there we go. Look, David, I'll throw you. You know, is this actually, you know, when people like you and I maybe listen to comments like that, has John got a point? Do we feel as though our nose has been put out of joint here, or do we have a right to think, oh, hang on a minute, that's a bit fruity?
I think it's always good to try to reflect on these things in an open-minded way, in the way that has the greatest good faith possible. But it's very difficult to see how every time someone says whiteness in this way, every time somebody uses white in a pejorative sense, it is anything other than obviously pejorative. And I come back to the point I made earlier. To judge people on the basis of their skin colour, not on the views they hold, or the principles they espouse, or the way in which they try to live their lives, is to me inherently and obviously a racist point of view. Now, it may not be popular to say that because it's the way that the diversity industry has conducted itself for quite a long time now, but I believe it to be the case. And I think one instance of this is a way that a lot of people on the diversity backing left react when you have, say, prominent black or Asian conservatives. There have been some really quite vile comments made about people like Suella Braverman, Rishi Sunak, and made about, say, Trevor Phillips, because of his bucking of the orthodoxy on these issues. And I think it is worth reflecting on why that is. It seems to be that it is necessary for parts of the left, if you are black, to have a certain set of views, and if you don't, you are cast out.
John, if the implication is that the royal family would have benefited from having a more ethnically diverse balcony, from what I can gather, the theory here is that just by virtue of being white, and potentially quite wealthy and privileged as well, that they are physically incapable of understanding certain aspects of society. Is that not the exact same type of stereotypical behaviour that people who are racist, who maybe use derogatory terms about, you know, certain demographics and crime, for example, right? Or just wheeling that out. Are we not in the same territory here?
The king, our current king, has never opened a pair of curtains in his life. You know, like they live a life that's completely different. The benefit of Meghan, I'll say it again, the benefit of having Meghan in the royal family.
But that's not because he's white, though, is it, John? Sorry, but that has got nothing to do with the fact that he's white. This is a privilege. This is a privilege question, isn't it?
It's because they're privileged, and look at this, because the royal family are never going to be in touch with us. But Diana made them different, and Meghan made them different, and both in different ways were driven out of the royal family. And that has been a terrible thing. And the royal family paid a huge price when Princess Diana died for that. And the royal family could pay another huge price for driving Harry and Meghan out when they could be great assets in terms of the way that Harry's open about his mental health, open about many issues that men should talk more about. And I think in the same way, Meghan showed us a type of a modern Britain and a modern British marriage with that mixed race marriage. And I just think it's very, very sad.
All right, David, look, come back to this, because there's quite a lot to go out there. But once you've answered that, I'd like you to answer another question for me, really, which is whether or not actually it was quite offensive for people who were basically saying that the whole coronation ceremony was poor and was ridiculous and was completely out of touch. I mean, at its root, it was a Christian service, OK? And, you know, I don't go to a synagogue or a mosque or a Gurdwara or a Hindu temple or anything like that and say, oh, gosh, that service is rubbish, because I think that probably would be bang out of order.
Well, on Mr McTurner's point about the king not having opened a pair of curtains in his life, that's because he's the king, not because he's white. And I'm sure that the Emperor of Japan or the King of Lesotho has equally never opened a pair of curtains or cooked a boiled egg or something. I think that's a rather inopportune and odious point. On the question of the Anglican ceremony, yes, because we are a country with a church by law established. We have an anointed sovereign, and it is absolutely a Christian ceremony. I thought that there were very good points within that Christian ceremony of trying to include other aspects of Christianity, for instance, the Byzantine chant that was included during parts of the liturgy. There was the involvement of the Cardinal Archbishop of Westminster, the first time a Catholic has been included since the Reformation, and of course there was, and most excellently not from the Christian but from the chief rabbi, the very great attempt to include the chief rabbi and his wife by allowing them to stay at St James's Palace the night before so that they were not breaking Shabbat. I think that this ceremony, if you listen to the liturgy and listen to the homily of the Archbishop of Canterbury and see every way in which it was conducted, has shown that you can be, as we are a Christian nation, you can also be inclusive of all the other faiths within that. And those who are carping about it, I think, are rather sad and soulless individuals who seem incapable of taking joy from anything with which they may disagree on a political level. Why not simply look at it and enjoy the fact that this was a very clear demonstration of a diverse Britain?
Oh, look, both of you, thank you very much. It's good stuff, good debate, well done. Right, it's John McTiernan there, who is, of course, a former advisor to Tony Blair, and David Aldrich-Bott, who's a political commentator, and indeed historian as well when it comes to all of that. Right, OK, moving on. So, coming up, blood test for sleepy drivers. Yes, there we go. I tell you what, clearly with my inability to read the auto cue there for a second, I could do one of those blood tests. A blood test for sleepy drivers could pave the way for prosecutions after research comes amid evidence that driving on less than 5 hours sleep is as dangerous as drink driving. Can I just say, it is not. There is no way that driving after 3 hours sleep is as dangerous as driving after 3 large glasses of Pinot Grigio. Anyway, Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us 4, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So, drowsy driving is apparently just as lethal as drink driving, drug driving, etc. But I'm just not sure I buy this. But a blood test to measure whether a driver who's caused an accident was impaired by lack of sleep could be available within 2 years. So this new invention could enable people to be prosecuted for driving while fatigued, which many sleep experts are actually calling for. It comes amid evidence that driving on less than 5 hours sleep is as dangerous as drink driving. Is this sensible or not? I'm just not sure it is. Neil Greig, thank you very much for joining me. He's the Director of Policy and Research at I Am Road Smart, which is the UK's biggest road safety charity. I get the thinking behind this, but what about people with newborn babies? What about nurses on the back of a night shift? What about all of these people who presumably now will not be able to drive because they've only had 2 hours kit?
Well, it's going to be very difficult to come up with a limit. I mean, the thing about drugs and drink is we have a limit. I mean, we know if you go over that limit, you will be affected, your driving will be affected, and you will be prosecuted. Coming up with a limit for sleep seems to me a really big challenge because we all sleep differently. 2 hours sleep for you, for me, 3 hours for others. Everybody's different, and we all react differently to it. So, this is early days for this research, but it has some potential. But I think actually setting a limit for the hours of sleep is going to be very difficult and certainly something that will stand up in court is going to be very difficult to define in the future.
Absolutely, and it's, I would only imagine, going to serve to make people have a worse night's sleep. If I knew that I had to drive my car at 6 in the morning and I'm already going to be thinking, I hope I get a good night's sleep, then if the threat of prosecution awaits me on the other side of it, I'm very unlikely to have a sound, solid 6 or 7 hours, I would imagine. But, I mean, look, how dangerous is actual fatigue driving? Is it equitable with drink driving? Because for me, 3 hours sleep is better than 3 large glasses of wine.
Well, I don't think you can compare them directly like that, but certainly driving whilst when you should be asleep, you can see the risk areas. After lunch, late, early hours of the morning, that's when we have more sleep-related crashes. When you're driving when you would normally be asleep, you're at a higher risk of having a crash. And the kind of crashes that people have when they fall asleep are the least survivable. Often what you find is the car drifts off to the left, hits something solid, no attempt made to brake, full-speed collisions. They're very difficult crashes. The problem is it's actually a fairly under-researched area. I do believe that fatigue and sleep, particularly amongst lorry drivers and commercial drivers, is a much bigger issue than we think it is. But the problem is, the people are dead after the crash. You can't stop them and say, did you fall asleep? You've got to try and piece the things together. So I think it's an issue we need to look at. It's an issue where at the IEM, we keep making the point that this isn't like drugs and drinking. People know when they're feeling tired. You should know when to stop because you don't suddenly fall asleep. If you're fatigued, if you've had a lack of sleep, you will know you are tired, and that's when you should stop driving.
OK, I just wonder if this paves the way, though, again, because presumably you'd have to do the same for loads of people, anyone operating heavy machinery, and before you know it, you're getting blood tested on a daily basis, and that feels a bit mental.
I think for bus drivers, airline pilots, train drivers, things like drug and drink testing on a daily basis are the sort of things they're actually used to. Those things are already happening. But certainly this is a different set of, from my reading of the research, a different set of blood tests are going to be required. That's going to cost money. Good employers should be looking at their driving fleet, checking that the drivers are getting their sleep, because it is a bigger issue than we realise.
Look, Neil, thank you very much. Great to chat to you. Neil Grieg there, who is the Director of Policy and Research at I Am Road Smart, which is the UK's biggest road safety charity. Right, OK, well, look, thank you very much, everybody. It's been an absolutely wonderful show. Emily Carver is going to be up next with Jubes and Co. And what we've got coming up very quickly? Got anything coming up quickly?
We've got lots coming up. We've got 0 hours contracts, GP appointments. Would you be happy to be told by a receptionist that you have to go to the pharmacist and not a GP? I wouldn't. OK, all right, good stuff. Well, there you go. Right, Patrick Christys here on GB News. I'll be back at 3 p.m. tomorrow. Take it easy, people. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Hello there. I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather by the Met Office. Rain or showers over the next few days as low pressure is in charge, but we will see some warm spells of sunshine too. Looking at the bigger picture, we can see, well, Atlantic weather systems moving in, bringing spells of rain, some heavy showers too, low pressure really dominating. However, towards the end of the week into the weekend, high pressure could settle things down for a couple of days. For the rest of Monday, an active end to the day, some thunderstorms pushing from Northern Ireland into southern Scotland eastward, some heavy rain also affecting southern and southeast England as we head into the early hours, but it does tend to become drier. A lot of cloud around though tonight, and that will keep temperatures in double figures for everyone. But a bit of a grey start to Tuesday morning. Outbreaks of rain still across southeast England, but this should start to push out the way quite quickly, and then it will actually brighten up for many of us through the morning into the afternoon. But the air is unstable, so this will trigger some heavy showers across the country. Some rumbles of thunder, some local disruption, hail in there too. But if you avoid the showers and in the sunshine, it will actually be a warm feeling day. Temperatures high teens, locally 20 or 21 Celsius possible. Into the evening time on Tuesday, we've still got some heavy showers to contend with, but they do tend to ease away.